across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate your company. Whether you're listening to us on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great, as always, to have your company. Don't forget, if you miss anything from the show, you can, of course, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. In just a couple of moments, I'll be speaking to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, to get his thoughts on, Andy Burnham, Keir Starmer, a general election, plus, of course, it is today, and I do want to pass this message on to my favourite audience members, of course, or, let's face it, almost to a man and a woman, Brexiteers. 10 years today we voted for Brexit, biggest democratic vote for anything in the history of our country. We voted to leave the EU. And the man who was, of course, instrumental in that is Nigel Farage. Let's go straight to him. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. To be fair, I think the really happy day was tomorrow, wasn't it? Because that was when you stayed up all night. Some of us got a couple of hours skip, woke up to the fabulous news. I mean, a lot of people are saying, it hasn't worked. We didn't get proper Brexit. What was the point? What would you say to that?
Yeah, what a morning it was. About 4 o'clock, as the sun was just coming up over the Thames. I was in a nightclub, actually.
Of course you were.
Well, of course I was. Yeah, dare to dream that the dawn is breaking on an independent United Kingdom. Look, it was the right thing to do. Of that I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever. But what has happened since has been, shameful, frankly. Many in Parliament, including the Speaker, John Bercow, refused to accept the result, thought we were all morons to have voted for it. They never respected it. They did their best to overturn it, to stop it, to make us vote again. And then when finally, in 2019, the Brexit Party in the European elections got rid of Mrs. May, in comes Boris. I thought, hooray, hooray. We're actually now going to get what we voted for. Not just leaving the European Union, but using those powers to cut immigration numbers, to control our borders, and of course, to get rid of excessive regulation for business. And what happened? We got the Boris wave. The Boris wave. 3.8 million people led into the country, only 17% of them on work permits. It's almost unbelievable to think about the scale of what they did. And then on the regulations, everybody from individual computer programmers to fishermen thought, well, this is great. The rules will get easier. And I have to say, Kemi Badenoch did play a role in this. She could have got rid of thousands of EU laws as a minister, didn't. The will wasn't there, not just from her, but from the government. And so we finished up in a place where, yes, of course, in foreign policy terms, we stand taller on the world stage. Yes, of course, if you want to roll out a vaccine, we can do it more quickly than being in the EU. All of those things, our trade, our growth actually is higher than France and Germany and Italy and all those things. But we expected to get immigration numbers down. They went through the roof. And that is not a failure of Brexit. That is a failure. In fact, I go a bit further than that, a betrayal by the political class of what they were elected to do and instructed to do in that referendum.
And yet, on one level, you could argue Brexit did work because we have full democratic accountability, and it means that every time a government fails after promising, as every single government from 2010 onwards has promised to do, but after Brexit, since 2020, every government that says we're going to cut immigration and then doesn't. I know Keir Starmer's claiming he has, but let's face it, that was as a result of Rishi Sunak's policies, and we're still nowhere near the tens of thousands net migration we were originally promised. But every time they fail, we get to boot them out, as happened in 2024, yes. In which case it has worked because they are democratically accountable. They can't just blame it on the EU.
No, they can't. You're right. I mean, before they'd say, ministers would shrug their shoulders. I went to Brussels, did my best, but sorry, we got outvoted. No, the finger is very firmly pointed now at government, at ministers. But interestingly, Julia, you may remember in the years running up to the referendum, I said my intention was to cause an earthquake in British politics. Well, the earthquake happened 10 years ago today. What happened on May the 7th in the local elections when Reform smashed the Labour Party in the north of England, which led to Burnham putting himself up. We're still going through the aftershocks. The aftershocks of that referendum. Okay. Our two traditional parties have not adjusted to it.
Well, certainly the other parties have not adjusted to it. I mean, we had Keir Starmer. You talked about the 3 years people trying to overturn it. Keir Starmer was instrumental in that, as Shadow Brexit Secretary, not a Democrat. Liberal Democrats, of course. Not Tories, frankly, working against the democratic mandate of the people. Andy Burnham, about to get a coronation, we believe, as the next Prime Minister of this country. He, like Keir Starmer, an avid Remainer, an avid rejoiner. He tried to talk it down during the Makerfield by-election, a leave voting area. But, of course, we know what he said only a matter of a few months ago, that he thought that we should rejoin the single market, which, of course, means, by definition, part of the single market is you would have free movement, not just of goods and services, but also of people. Are you worried that Brexit is going to be undone by the back door?
Constitutionally, no. We're not going to rejoin it, but we will align ever more closely with it, which, of course, takes away any competitive advantage that we may choose to have. But I think there's a broader point, whether it's to do with defence, whether it's to do with our relationship with Europe, whether it's to do with our relationship with NATO, America, the economy, the self-employed, family farms, all these things. I haven't got a clue what Andy Burnham stands for. He wasn't elected on the Labour manifesto of 2024. If there is a coronation, we will have a Prime Minister with no mandate whatsoever. And I think the British public are tired of the game of musical chairs that, frankly, has been going on in Downing Street for the best part of the last decade. I mean, we look like the Italians back in the 1980s. It's almost unbelievable. And that's why I believe there has to be a general election. Now, when we vote, I know we vote for our local MP, but effectively, we vote for or against a man or woman to be Prime Minister. To keep chopping and changing like this is unacceptable in normal circumstances, but with somebody about whom we know nothing as to where his policies will lie, there must be a general election.
You know as well as I do, and Richard Dyche, your deputy, this morning has called it a coup. But constitutionally, there is no requirement for a general election. This morning, a spokesman for Andy Burnham has ruled out a snap election. Undoubtedly, a new Prime Minister, anyone who's going to... I mean, I think most people think anyone's going to be better than Keir Starmer, certainly for the time being. You may probably prefer to keep Keir Starmer on for that reason. There may be a bounce. Are you, at Reform, are you actually ready for a general election? Would you prefer, if there was one, that you were fighting Keir Starmer rather than Andy Burnham, who, let's face it, I completely accept we don't know what his policies are. I don't think he knows what his policies are. There's no evidence that he does either. But at the end of the day, like a former Prime Minister who got elected with a big bounce, with your help in 2019, a popular Metro mayor with charisma, he might be harder to beat, mightn't he?
And there is a sort of double irony here, that the run-up to our success on May the 7th was vote Reform, get Starmer out. But the truth is, actually, for us, it would be far better as a party if he stayed. And the other part of this is, of course, Makerfield became vote Burnham, get Starmer out. So we've been slightly hoist with our own petard. On the face of it, he will be more attractive to a wider number of people than Starmer is now. But you're looking at Starmer now. 2 years ago, he wasn't disliked by the public. He was sort of thought to be, well, he seems perfectly pleasant, nice chap. So you don't know. Metro mayors are popular. Boris, as you say yourself, was popular. Burnham is popular as a Metro mayor. Having to make policy decisions can change that very, very quickly. And I think if, as I suspect, it's going to be a government that goes on increasing taxes, that doesn't worry about the scale of the national debt and how the world and the markets are viewing that, isn't prepared to get tough on the massive explosion of welfare dependency, then look, we will fight Labour on that turf.
Well, taxes up, debt up, welfare up, you're predicting. Do you think defence spending is going to go up? We understand this morning that the Prime Minister is going to announce his defence investment plan, the long-awaited, the plan which we understand was so poor that it was rejected by John Healey as Defence Secretary. He resigned, so did Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes a couple of weeks ago because it simply wasn't enough money. We don't know what he's going to actually announce, but it's going to tie Burnham's hands. Should one of the top priorities of a Burnham government be to invest sufficiently in our defence?
So Keir Starmer could, as a parting shot, do something very valuable in the national interest. He could put a number on it that is ambitious. He could put a number on it that necessitates welfare cuts, etc. If he does that and ties Burnham's hands, he will have done the country a favour as he leaves number 10.
What other priorities should there be for a Burnham government? I mean, bearing in mind you're not in government now, so surely you'd like the country to be run well.
Well, 1,912 people have crossed the English Channel in the last week, most of them undocumented young males. Some of them will pose a threat to national security. Others will pose a direct threat to women and girls in our country. Some could even be linked or associated with terrorist groups. I mean, I'm not over-egging this. This is the truth of where we are. Will Burnham stop the boats, or will it be open borders Burnham? And I don't see him stopping the boats. I don't see him cutting immigration numbers. I don't see him getting tough on law and order. I just don't see that. And I feel that the Labour backbenches are now shifting so far away, so far to the left, so far away on economic reality and much else, that I doubt, even if he tried, he'd be able to control them. So I think the truth is not much will change.
There's a lot of talk about how when Burnham, if it is Burnham, as it's expected, becomes our Prime Minister, it could be as early as the 17th of July, probably rather sooner than he would like it to happen. Needs a few months to get his ducks in order. We've had 7 Prime Ministers in 10 years. A lot of people are saying Britain is now ungovernable, and you mentioned we're turning into Italy, except one of ours isn't, alternately Silvio Berlusconi. Are we ungovernable, or is it that politicians are now being held to account more?
Britain is broken. Britain is broken.
What do you mean by that?
Nothing works. Nothing works anymore the way we've always understood it to. Nothing works, whether it's waiting times in hospital, or whatever it is, nothing actually works. We get poorer and poorer. Quarter of a million of our brightest and best emigrated last year. Britain is broken. Our politics is a symptom of just how broken the country is. And that's why I believe that we need radical political change. People are prepared to think outside the box. People are prepared to say and do things that will be attacked by the mob on social media, but won't worry about it. And if you wanted to have a look at an example of a Prime Minister who was in many ways the epitome of the professional career political class, it is Andy Burnham.
You say radical political change. Are you actually at Reform ready for an election? There's a lot of criticism over your choice of Rob Kenyon, a local plumber at the Makerfield by-election. You know, that seemed like an ideal choice. He'd stood for the seat before, but actually, you know, the vetting once again failed. I know you say, you know, and a lot of us would say, oh, who cares what someone wrote about Carol Vorderman's bottom a few years back. But it turns out a lot of female voters, a lot of women do care about those things. Lots of talk about how you have a woman problem, but are you actually ready for an election? Are you ready, if Andy Burnham did call a snap election, if he became Prime Minister, are you ready to actually go for an election, if you win it, to hit the ground running?
Well, 3 quick points. Number one, no candidate would have beaten Andy Burnham in that election. It was vote Burnham, popular local mayor of Greater Manchester, get Starmer out. And yes, Kenyon said some things, you know, the sort of things that get said in pubs by blokes that have had a few pints, all right? I'm not condoning it in any way, but that is just the fact of where it is. Second point, do we have a woman problem? Well, we've got very prominent women in our party. You know, we've got Dame Andrea Jenkins heading up Lincolnshire as the mayor there, Layla Cunningham lining up to take on Sadiq Khan in London, etc. The third question to answer is, are we ready for a general election? Are we ready to have one tomorrow? Well, no one is. No one is. But have we been making plans in case of this contingency ever since May the 7th? We have, and we've got a couple of thousand people who are going through the process right now. We will be ready whenever it is.
Kemi Badenoch, front page of the Mail on Sunday this weekend, ruling out the possibility of any electoral pact with Reform. Can you also rule it out categorically?
Well, as I said a moment ago, it was Kemi Badenoch that could have got rid of 4,000 EU laws as minister.
I mean, you know perfectly well ministers don't have the power. Everything's up to prime ministers.
No,
you know that.
But you know what? It's difficult to do a deal with a party that gave us net zero and wrote it into law. It's difficult to do a deal with a party that promised to do one thing and gave us the Boris wave. So for me, it's about trust. Very difficult to trust them.
That sounds to me like something of a watering down, should we say, a smoothing down of. I mean, a couple of years ago, you were talking about wanting to destroy the Conservative Party.
I never once in my life said that. Not once in my life did I use that word. I said they might destroy themselves. Look, I'm an old city trader, right? I shake hands with people because my word is my bond, and I do it on trust. I couldn't really be clearer. I don't trust them.
OK, isn't the case that actually an electoral pact before any election would do you both damage? You both want to. We'll see what happens when the next election is. Maybe it's in 2 years' time, maybe it's sooner, and whoever is riding high in the polls. And we know we've seen a lot of tactical voting in recent years. Maybe left-wing tactical voting against you guys. Maybe people who would vote Reform or Tories voting for the other party because they think they're a better bet in their constituency. But a pact could actually damage both parties before. After an election, if it were possible to form a coalition government, realistically, you aren't going to say no to a chance to get into government, even in coalition, are you?
You know, trying to predict the future and what might happen, you can speculate on that all
But we're talking
like.
about what you'd be willing to do.
All I know, well, I said what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to lead reform, which is currently between 9 and 10 points ahead of everybody else in the polls. All we need to do is get another 3 or 4%, and we'll have a majority government with a very, very clear, firm set of commitments to bring about radical change.
Have you spoken to Kemi Badenoch personally about any possibility of any deal?
No.
There's been no conversation. Right, now, you're going to get cross with me, but I'm going to ask you about this. This 5 million quid that you took as a gift from the crypto millionaire Christopher Harborne, who lives in Thailand. You've described it variously as something that would pay for your security for years because of the huge physical threats that you do face, and I'm very aware of that. You've also talked about it being a reward for all your work on Brexit. Harborne has given, many millions more to the party, which has been declared. You did not declare this money because you said it was a private gift. You weren't in Parliament. You're now being investigated by the Privileges Committee. This is being thrown around on social media, has been hugely damaging to you. Do you regret not declaring that money?
No.
Why not?
Because it's a purely private matter. It had nothing to do with politics whatsoever. I don't believe the rules in any way suggested that I should. So I didn't. And it wasn't a donation, it was a gift. It was an unconditional gift. All right? Now, as for his motives for doing that, well, I think he thought that maybe having given up a quarter of a century of my life, given up a good career in the City of London, faced all the abuse, perhaps he thought I deserved it. But that's irrelevant. It was an unconditional gift. So whether, and I made it very clear that I will need to have protection until the day I die, whenever that is, and none of us, of course, quite know the answer to that, and that would be its primary purpose. But frankly, I can do with the money as I wish. It is with the Standards Commissioner. I believe, having looked very carefully with lawyers, at the rule book, that I'm in the right.
Most people think of a gift as, I don't know, a bottle of champagne, a box of chocolates, not 5 million quid. Do you understand why most of us find it absolutely impossible to believe that someone who lives on the other side of the world, no matter how much he loves Brexit, and I don't think anyone loves it more than you and me, that they would go, you know what, Nige, love you, here's 5 million quid, no strings attached. Do you understand why that, frankly, is not believable?
I think you'll find he voted in Hampshire, so I think you'll find that's where home, actually. But whatever. Yeah, they may well do. And people inherit vast sums of money and all sorts of things happen in life.
He's not your dad. You didn't inherit it.
People inherit money.
He's a crypto billionaire living on the other side of the planet, and he gave you... But again, you talked about, you said this is an unconditional gift. Yeah. Is it a gift, a reward, or is it for your security? Because
no, it's an unconditional gift. I can spend it on Ferraris if I wish to, all right?
Are you spending it on Ferraris, or are you spending it on your security?
None of your business.
The thing is, when politicians get freebies, Even if it's before they're politician, the rules are very clear that if it's before up to a year before you become elected as an MP, and I do accept that at the time that you were given this gift, you were not an MP and you were not planning to return at that time. I'd had conversations with people in Reform around that time. Nevertheless, the rules state that you should declare that money.
No.
But did you think that Keir Starmer should have declared his free suits from Lord Ali?
Well, they were political.
How is the suit political and £5 million, more money than most people would ever think of or ever earn or enjoy in their lives? How can that not be political?
By the way, this is a hugely successful British business.
Good for him.
All right, which is a good thing.
Yes, good for him.
Yeah. Julia, it's a private thing. It wasn't a political donation. If you read the rules carefully, I've done absolutely nothing wrong.
Then why is there a Standards and Privileges Committee investigation into it? Why has this done so much damage?
Because it has to you, and it has to the London media class, but it didn't.
No, I don't think that's fair. When I first heard, I don't think I am typical of that class, and I understand your security needs. I think you know now that it was a mistake not to declare that money.
No, I don't. And I spoke to hundreds of people in Makerfield, walking up and down streets over 4 days of campaigning, and only one person raised it as an issue. Only one person raised it as an issue.
Are you cooperating fully with the committee?
Of course, but there isn't much to say.
Wouldn't it be easier? Declare it. Show the receipts for what you've spent it on for security. Round-the-clock security costs an absolute fortune, hundreds of thousands of pounds. Job done.
This is an unconditional gift, all right? And I was reported, as the local elections came up, with the chairman of the Conservative Party, they were terrified of what we might do. And of course, we did wipe out the Conservatives in Essex and places like that. They were terrified of it. They've tried to make it political. I don't believe it is. I believe it's purely personal.
Let's end on a happier note for both of us. As I said, today marks the Brexit referendum 10th anniversary. Just one final note. I asked you earlier whether you thought the people in government at the moment were actually going to try and take us back into the EU by hook or by crook, by the back door. Do you think if any of the parties did actually win next election, it wasn't you, but another party on the left, and they were promising a referendum on rejoining the EU, do you think the British people would vote to rejoin?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. To vote to join, to go back to giving £20 billion a year as a contribution, to commit to joining the euro, not a chance.
Nigel Farage, it's a happy 10th anniversary for us. It's going to be a very interesting few weeks in British politics, perhaps a very interesting few years as well. Leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage MP, thank you very much indeed for joining us. 10:25 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be hearing from the political editor of The Critic, Henry Hill, what he thinks. And indeed, I want to hear from you. What did you think of that, what he had to say? Particularly, £5 million. Did I spend too long on that? What do you, I don't care about that £5 million. An awful lot of people do. 0344 499 1000. Also love to get your thoughts on Andy Burnham. A small matter. He's about to basically get a coronation to be our next Prime Minister. It could be within a matter of just a few weeks. What do you think a Burnham government will do? Rather crucial, that. It's interesting that we don't actually know yet, isn't it? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls to charge the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. This is Talk.
What they're ashamed of is the English flag. Scottish flag, fine. Welsh flag, fine. Irish, everything like that's marvellous. But no. We can't be English. And this has been going on for a long, long time.
He would be Prime Minister of the most toxic political brand in the country at the moment, which is Labour. And that is what we will be battling against.
Our Prime Minister is allegedly attacked by another nation and nothing is said.
This is a reminder that Russia regards the United Kingdom as a hostile power.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. As I said, Henry Hill is here, political editor of The Critic, very patiently waiting. Nigel Farage was on the line at the moment we'd asked him. Lots of guests are on there already. He's a punctual man, and therefore we didn't have a chance to introduce you earlier. Henry Hill, political editor of The Critic, joining us for the whole show today.
Good morning.
I bet you're delighted to be here because the aircon's working today.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. We had some hot, yeah, exactly. We had some hot moments yesterday. I think see, for me, it's old money. It hit 80 degrees in here, but in a stifling studio, I think in old money. But there we are. Sweltering night, big storms overnight.
Yeah.
Thank you, by the way, to Ryanair for leaving my 83-year-old mother stranded at Cardiff Airport, which wasn't where she was supposed to arrive, for hours on end last night. Appreciate that. No bus turned up to transfer them to the airport they were supposed to land to. Thanks, Ryanair. Really appreciate it. It's all right, she's only 83. She's only had a hip operation and knee operation. Don't you worry about it, mate. Yeah. There we are. Just saying. Always appreciate your good service. Yeah, when you've got passengers who've been taken to a different country. Wasn't supposed to land in Cardiff. Weren't supposed to land in Wales at all. But there we are. But yeah, a pretty heavy night for an awful lot of people. Pretty heavy day yesterday.
It's been incredible.
It's been very enjoyable.
It's been, yeah. There was a wonderful tweet from Michael Crick where he dug out a tweet of his from exactly 2 years ago where he was like, you know what? I wonder if in a couple of years' time, when this government is deeply unpopular, we journalists are going to feel a bit guilty about the fact that we gave them such an easy ride.
I don't.
Well, no, and indeed, if anything, working as I did at Conhome at the time, I maybe did give them slightly too easy a ride because I was cognizant of the fact that I looked like incredibly partisan. But it's to his credit that he actually dug that out and looked at it. But it is absolutely extraordinary hearing that absurd speech. I think the interesting thing about it is that no Prime Minister can ever just say, well, I failed, right?
It just really wasn't very good. Sorry, wasn't up to it.
So he was there being like, oh, I'm really proud of all of these achievements. One of them that he listed was the 2-child limit, which he tried to keep and which broke his authority.
And wasn't in his manifesto.
No, and the rest of it was just,
No, I mean, it was embarrassing. And I said on yesterday around this time, I just thought, everyone's going to be nice and say he was honourable. He was drag kicking and screaming. I've got no time for it. Bye-bye, good riddance. I wish he was going sooner. One person who doesn't wish he was going sooner, of course, is Andy Burnham, because he is now the anointed king. That selfie in Westminster Hall with quite a few members of the actual current cabinet, I thought was a little bit on the cheeky side, a little bit sort of 2 fingers up to the Prime Minister. Lots of cheering in the House of Commons when he was sworn in. Someone shouted out, "He's not the Messiah." The old famous Monty Python, A Life of Brian line, and he said, "But I'm a naughty boy." But I mean, he's a nice guy. Yeah. Genuinely, he's good company. He really is good company, and he's got a lot of popularity, great charisma. And I keep saying, so did Boris Johnson. I would say Burnham's better company than Boris Johnson, certainly. But can hold down a marriage. There's an amazing thing. But I'm old-fashioned like that. But it's just extraordinary, I think, how he's being sort of just fated and how he is being treated as fated. And it's fascinating hearing even cabinet ministers like Nicholas Thomas-Symonds this morning on the radio being asked about, you're giving your full support to Andy Burnham, but you don't know what his policies are. But he's very popular and he proved in Makerfield he can defeat reform. But what are his policies? Backing someone as a candidate to be the Prime Minister of this country, not knowing anything that he was going to do. And the fact that we don't even know who his Chancellor would be, the fact that he's apparently, Shabana Mahmood is one of the names. She wants to say as Home Secretary, so that's not going to happen. Wes Streeting or Ed Miliband, those 2 Chancellors could not be more different In which case, those are two completely different sets of policies for two completely different governments. So even Andy Burnham doesn't know what government or what policies he's going to deliver.
No, I was talking to a journalist who's much closer to the Labour beat than me, and they pointed out that the sort of three names that he had as his options for Chancellor were literally every non-socialist wing of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
So it's like this is completely... It is interesting that there is... Burnham has been held up. He's talked about Manchesterism. There's nothing to Manchesterism,
it's
right?
not a thing.
Like, no, it's not. One, most of the actual policy work in Manchester is done by Sir Richard Lees before Andy Burnham even got there. And two, the whole model of Manchester is basically that the British government lends it money on really easy terms.
Yeah.
Now, the bond markets aren't willing to do that for us. I do think it's very funny that this man who has been manoeuvring to get into Parliament and take over from Starmer for months is now apparently complaining that he might get to take over too quickly because he hasn't done any thinking. And it's like, what were you doing when you were...
But this is my thing. Why do you want to be Prime Minister if you don't have things you want to enact? Apparently it's not about nationalisation. Well, I mean, do people seriously think you're going to nationalise water and suddenly we're never going to have, hose pipe bans and there's going to be no sewage in the river and all our water bills are going to go down back to the 1980s before they were privatised? Not going to happen. I mean, and that will cost a fortune and take ages. Nationalising public utilities, there's a perfectly good argument for it, and it'd be very popular. But it wouldn't actually change anyone's lives. It wouldn't produce growth. It wouldn't cut immigration. It wouldn't deal with the welfare bill or defence spending. I mean, there is so much on his list, none of which we have heard him speak about at all.
No, I think that the important thing to understand about this, you were asking earlier, how could a Labour MP support Burnham? Think about what Sir Keir Starmer's pitch actually was. It was that he could bring back growth, not by making difficult decisions, but by getting the Tories out and the grown-ups back in the room. That was the whole vibe of the Labour's 2024 manifesto. Now, that didn't work. But if you still don't want to make painful decisions, if you're a Labour MP who still doesn't want to make cuts, then it's really important that you then pin that on Starmer's personal failings.
Yeah.
And if only we had a different man, a more charming man, a more northern man, we could still not have to make any difficult decisions and growth would come back somehow. There's nothing to it. It's absurd, but...
It really is. Emperor has no clothes. I mean, again, those of us, do you think about Michael Crick saying there should be more scrutiny? I was saying long before Labour didn't have a plan, they didn't have a clue what they were going to do, and Keir Starmer would be a terrible Prime Minister. And he was. I've been saying it throughout. And I'm saying right now, Andy Burnham is much more likeable, much more greater personal skills. I'm telling you right now, he's going to be a terrible Prime Minister because he isn't going to have a clue what he's going to do. Popular. You need to have a plan. Otherwise, why do you want to be there? If you said to me right now, you'd be Prime Minister tomorrow, I could give you 20, 30, 40 policies. OK, I would need practical people to deliver them. I'm not policy wonk, but I'd know what I'd want to do. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. What do you think a Burnham government's going to do? I'd love to hear your reaction to Nigel Farage's interview as well. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Love to hear from you as well. If you're celebrating today 10 years since we voted for Brexit, do you believe it's a success or a failure? A bit of both? Well, up next we'll get the thoughts of Baroness Kate Hoey, former Labour MP, now an independent peer, but also keen Brexit campaigner. That's up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:36 is the time. We're turning things around a little bit. Obviously, getting your calls in about 10 minutes' time. We'll get those on egg. So do get on the line, 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on what a Burnham government will actually do, what it would look like. Any preference for Chancellor of the Exchequer? Ed Miliband, anybody? Ed Miliband? Love to hear your thoughts on that. What you thought of Nigel Farage's interview. And, of course, 10th anniversary today of us voting for Brexit. But, of course, it was tomorrow morning, in the very, very early hours, that we actually found out that we had actually voted to leave the EU. Here, I watch this quite regularly, I'm not going to lie. Here is David Dimbleby announcing Britain's vote on Brexit back in, well, the early hours of the 24th of June 2016 on the BBC.
Well, at 20 minutes to 5, we can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU. We are absolutely clear now that there is no way that the Remain side can win. It looks as though the gap's going to be something like 52 to 48, so a 4-point lead for leaving the EU. And that's the result of this referendum, which has been preceded by weeks and months of argument and dispute and all the rest of it. The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
Glorious, glorious moment. It gives me goosebumps still. Baroness Kate Hoey joins us, former Labour MP, independent peer, keen Leave campaigner. Kate, come on, that must give you shivers down the back of your bones, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, and it's 10 years seems like yesterday in many ways, and you look back to it and think of all those wonderful people who worked so hard, and we were just up against the whole establishment of the UK government, the media, everybody, and we came through, and I think it was just a great day to show that when people really want to change something, they can if they all unite, and we did.
Yeah. Voting works.
Yes, it does. And, there were so many people who said, as you know, from right from the beginning, oh, it's impossible. Of course, we won't leave. And, when you look back at all the way that the Remain campaigners campaigned, it is quite a miracle in many ways that we did win, but we did. And I think while people might be, slightly concerned about not having got what we should have got out of leaving really, really well, there's still a great feeling of, it's now our own country's decisions that make a difference.
And we get to, I was talking with Nigel Farage the last time, we get to boot out the politicians who don't do what they say they're going to do because they can't blame the EU anymore. Exactly. It is very interesting how many people we're told in poll after poll say, Brexit is not delivered. To the extent that it hasn't, look, people very much confuse any economic problems we have from lockdown and from the Ukraine war and the impact of those. It's actually physically impossible to actually identify anything. But in fact, again, we've had higher growth than the other major economies of Europe since that time. And even though we hadn't Brexited before 2020, the lack of stability and the uncertainty meant it did have an effect. But we've had higher growth of that period from Germany, France and Italy, which is a bit of a giveaway because I don't think they Brexited. Are you, and again a question I put to Nigel Farage, you were originally on the Vote Leave team, he was on the Leave.eu, but all working to the same effect. Are you worried that actually the likes of Keir Starmer, when he's outgoing as a Prime Minister, he's tried to sort of just slowly take us back in by hook or by crook, but Andy Burnham, only a few months ago, before he was running for the Makerfield by-election, we had to keep stum about his being a Remainer. He's talked about rejoining the EU. He says he'd like to do that in his lifetime. Are you concerned that Brexit is going to be undermined?
I think the penalties of going back in now would be so great that even many people who feel fervently pro-EU would discover that actually it just isn't the right thing. It couldn't possibly work. We'd have to take the euro, we'd be paying a lot of extra money. But it worries me more that what we're going to see is I think, as we've talked before, about that drip approach to going back. So you bring in things where we end up not having the real control that we all voted, those of us who voted to leave, wanted. So that is worrying. I think Andy Burnham having such a leave seat, I know Reform lost, but the reality was people were voting to get rid of Keir Starmer. And, there must have been so many people who just voted there because they knew that if they voted for Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer was out, then they'd got rid of Keir Starmer without really. And I think Andy Burnham will find it very difficult to be proclaiming loudly that he wants to go back into the EU. Yeah. I think he will do what Keir Starmer has done, perhaps in a more kind of intelligent way about how we might get back in. And I think his relationships probably will be better with the, some of the other European Union countries. It's interesting that they've postponed the big meeting in July.
This is supposed to be the big EU reset meeting.
Yes. Now, that gives, of course, Andy Burnham time perhaps to work out what he wants. I don't think he knows very much at the moment what he does want because he hasn't actually told us. So we are in a limbo situation with him. But as far as the EU is concerned, I've always seen it as a sovereignty issue. I just couldn't understand why we'd want to be always having to do what 26 other countries want. 27.
Yeah, that was it for me. Absolutely.
It's just the most awful. And then, the economy-wise, we're not doing great, but neither is the rest of the EU. In fact, we're doing a lot better, and it gives us that opportunity to be more free about how we deal with other countries not in the European Union. And it is it is declining, the European Union. It's not as important as it used to be, I think, across the world. And we've been able to get other trade agreements. So I'm still optimistic, but, obviously there are things that if we'd had leadership and if we hadn't had Keir Starmer spending 3 years in Parliament trying to stop us leave, he is absolutely responsible. For anyone who says now, we haven't got the right, we haven't left in the right way. Well, blame Keir Starmer because he stopped it and he made it so difficult to leave. When Boris Johnson came in, he had to go quickly and get an agreement. Otherwise, we would have lost altogether.
I'm afraid I also blame Theresa May. She should hang her head in shame, and the civil servants and all the people. Again, Liberal Democrats, every single person, the Speaker, John Burke at the time, every single person in Parliament or in government who basically attempted to undermine that vote instead of acknowledging it. And actually, if the whole country, if every party said, right, let's get the best deal. We are absolutely united. We stand firm. We'd have got a much better deal. It would have been over, a whole thing over and done much quicker. We could have announced we were leaving much quicker, and we could have been booming long before. And again, it's entirely on them. Again, I'm not having high hopes with Andy Burnham on that front. Let's talk more generally.
But also, we've never had a leader who stood up to the EU once we left. They just kowtowed and gave in, and it's as if we're almost got no confidence in our own country, and that's what I want to see. I want to see a party and a government that's actually got confidence in our country, that we can say, no, sorry, go away, we're not doing this, we're doing it in our way.
Yeah, but it is fascinating that the Remainers, they seem to think money is everything, and in fact it's not. It isn't everything. And people say people got poorer. People haven't got poorer because of Brexit, but even if they had, they were told they would, and they went, fair enough, we'd still rather be in control of our country. Now, one of the reasons, one of the things that we're often told at the moment, about to have our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years since then, is, and of course David Cameron resigned after losing that referendum, having said he wouldn't, is that actually we've become ungovernable. Do you think we're ungovernable, or do you think that Andy Burnham, you go back years in the Labour Party before you sat as an independent here, do you think that he has, with his track record in Manchester and his charisma, undoubted popularity and charisma, that he can actually be a successful Prime Minister?
I think for the first 6 months or so, he's going to be very popular. People will like him. Yeah. He's definitely got a way of being able to chat to people, talk to people, make them feel that he's listening to them. And the party will, of course, rally round him, as we saw yesterday in that ridiculous big shot before even Keir Starmer had almost,
He will. Talk about trampling on someone's grave. The earth is still settling.
I thought it was a bit too soon. He should have waited till he'd become Prime Minister. But especially as Wes Streeting had already said he wasn't going to stand against him, so he's got no real opposition. But I think then, it's not. Yes, Keir Starmer was hopeless, and we know he was a human rights lawyer. That was all he was interested in. But the reality is the Labour Party hasn't really changed. And what we're going to see now is, a move from people who don't want to see the radical changes that are needed if we're going to get the country back to getting growth, which is so crucial. And, that he's not going to cut regulations on businesses. He's not going to, cut back on welfare because his party won't let him. So, the leader will give them a short-term boost.
Yeah.
But it's not going to change anything.
But at the end of the day, someone being nice and friendly is all very well, but if they can't answer the question, what are you going to do and how much are you going to spend? And on the defence, fund, are we spending enough to defend ourselves and our allies from threats from Russia and elsewhere? These are about specifics, isn't it? It's very easy. If you're a Metro Mayor, you can be very popular, you can do a good job, but you don't essentially have any proper opposition. You're not being held to account every single week at, say, PMQs or in the newspapers in the same way. Do you think he's going to find it all a little bit of a shock when he is held to account? Because I've noticed even already this morning, the BBC and others are going, well, what's he going to do? What are his policies? Asking MPs, why are you supporting someone you don't know what his policies are? We don't even know who his Chancellor's going to be.
Yeah, and we have to remember that while Labour have a big majority, they didn't have a big majority actually in terms of the turnout and the vote in the general election. So he's got all of that, and I think the media really didn't question Starmer at the beginning. They just took it as Labour's won. They wanted rid of the Tories so much that it didn't really matter. Yeah. And now I think maybe the media this time will be just a little bit more questioning, and Andy Burnham can get away for a while with not saying very much. But as soon as he's actually Prime Minister and as soon as, day-to-day things happen, he's going to have to come out. And that's when I think it'll be a test of just how really different it's going to be. And I'm not sure it is.
Absolutely. Baroness Kate Hoey, former Labour MP, independent peer, thank you. Great to talk to you. Henry Hill, sitting in the studio, this is the case, isn't it? I think journalists should be doing their job all the time. And, we hold people to account on this station at all time, whether we are broadly supportive of their policies or not. But again, I don't know whether I support any of Andy Burnham's policies. I don't know what they are. Do you think he does?
No, I don't think so. The really remarkable thing is when you dig into his role as Mayor of Manchester, and there's a wonderful piece by a local journalist in Manchester about this, is how few of the decisions he ever made. Manchester has been an amazing local government success story, but those decisions were all made by Sir Richard Lees. And
deputy.
Yeah, and Manchester Council. Many of them before Andy Burnham even came in. Many of them before the mayoralty existed.
Even a lot of the economic boom they've seen. Right. Some of it apparently is just numbers don't really kind of stand up to scrutiny. But also a lot of it was started with regeneration years and years ago before he was.
Also decisions which, if Andy Burnham made them at the national level, would bring in some growth, but would be very controversial. So, for example, setting aside the affordable housing requirements and just saying, my goodness, we just need to get things built. Now, would Labour MPs like that? No, they'd absolutely hate it, but it would bring back growth. But will Burnham do it? Labour backbenchers hold the whip hand over the entire government. They broke the Prime Minister's authority.
And they're the same ones that Keir got.
Exactly. The same public accounts, the same truculent backbenchers, and the same electorate who don't want tax rises, and the same manifesto. There's no reason to think he can change any of these things.
And the same bond markets.
Exactly.
Do you think the big giveaway will be who he appoints as Chancellor?
Yes, in as much as it will tell us at least the shape of the fight that he wants to have. If he picks somebody from the Labour right, that means that he's going to at least try and reassure the bond markets, which is going to put him on a collision course with his backbenchers. If he were to pick somebody like Ed Miliband, that means that he is on a collision...
Start packing people. Start looking for homes in Portugal or Greece, that's all I can say.
Well, exactly, but it means he'll be picking a fight with the bond markets, which he'll lose, and it means that he'll be picking a fight with the electorate over taxes, and he'll lose that one even harder.
Oh, it's going to be a rip-roaring few months and years, is it not? 10:50 is the time. We're going to be taking a quick break, then we'll get to your calls. Love to hear your thoughts on everything and anything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
What they're ashamed of is the English flag. Scottish flag, fine. Welsh flag, fine. Irish, everything like that's marvellous. But no. We can't be English. And this has been going on for a long, long time.
He would be Prime Minister of the most toxic political brand in the country at the moment, which is Labour. And that is what we will be battling against.
Our Prime Minister is allegedly attacked by another nation and nothing is said.
This is a reminder that Russia regards the United Kingdom as a hostile power.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Moved our questions around a little, our answers of calls around a little bit because, of course, we spoke to Nigel Farage a little bit earlier on the show. Let's get straight to your calls. Pat is on the line in London, and Pat, you want to talk about Andy Burnham because, we're told he's the great white hope. I mean, he's virtually given a coronation, star-studded entrance to Westminster yesterday when he arrived to be sworn in as the new MP for Makerfield. But are you a little bit pessimistic about his abilities?
Well, I'm greatly pessimistic about his abilities. I mean, it's like Boris Johnson. But a lot of people said he was a good mayor of London, but when he ran the country, it wasn't so good, was it? And it's like running Manchester. Well, it's like running Salford City Football Club. Basically, you might do well, get a couple of promotions, but if you go up to the Premier League, you're not really suited for that environment.
Well, what people are pointing out, he was health secretary, he was culture secretary, he worked in the Home Office, that he has got this track record in government. And actually, you have plenty of people who come into government. I mean, like Keir Starmer, who'd never served a day in office, much less experience. You could argue he's got more experience. He's got more experience in government than, say, Nigel Farage would have.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a journeyman, so does that give you any right to be a like on the big chair?
Well, I mean, the right would be if he gets elected, whichever, as the leader of the biggest party in the House of Commons under our constitutional system, he is the Prime Minister. And here's the thing, I mean, I'm not quite sure what his defence policy was, or his welfare policy, or his general foreign policy, or his trade policy was when he was Mayor of Manchester. And I don't think he's thought about any of these things.
No, because when he was mayor, he probably didn't have that much opposition to him.
No.
He could do what he wanted, and he made the what was it, the trams or the buses or something. But then that's just like, I mean, if I was mayor and I'll say, oh yeah, free bus passes for this, free bus. Yeah. I mean that's sort of like not.
It's not controversial, really, is it?
It's not a fine. Let somebody else pick up the tab, like, you know what I mean, or whatever. I mean, it's apples and oranges, isn't it? Really?
You're not convinced. Do you think he's going to crash and burn, as people say, crash and burn him?
Well, look, whenever the Labour government, whatever Labour government, whatever era. I mean, you only got to go back to the late 70s. I mean, whenever a Labour government was in, it was always like, 10 helmets on and the old air raid warning.
Yeah, OK, Pat is not convinced. I think we can safely say he's not a big Burnham fan. Before we get to the next call, let me get some of your texts and messages coming in. Neil says, same old, I just expect him to call everyone far right and racist. Ruin the country, says Ian, in terms of what he expects the Burnham government to do. James says, look at those parasite Labour MPs jumping from one host to another. I mean, they really did. It was, I would go as far as saying unseemly yesterday. Dean says, why can't we just have a decent Prime Minister that will stick up for the British people? Are we asking too much? It doesn't seem too much to us, does it? Debbie says nothing different. She's expecting nothing different. Arthur says, considering he is another soft pro-immigration lefty, it's probably going to be terrible. Mo says he will be slightly more palatable. That's the best you can give him. I mean, to be fair, we won't have to look at and listen to Keir Starmer again. I'm just saying, There are plus points to this. I mean, at least you could bear to listen to Burnham, and he doesn't have the same attitude where he just thinks. I really don't think he does actually sort of think, that everyone else in the country is an idiot and a bigot. I mean, that would be a good start, wouldn't it? But I think, again, in terms of policies, I ain't seeing nothing. Let's go to Dave, who's on the line. He's in Blackpool. Dave, you want to talk about my interview with Nigel Farage, don't you?
Hello, Andy.
Hello.
Good show as usual. I listen to you most mornings.
Thank you very much.
I can't understand why Farage is getting... He's got £5 million security, OK?
Yeah.
He's had bricks thrown at him on the bus, and if it had missed him and hit somebody else in the background, that was assault. It got thrown by an unwashed, uneducated lefty. Starmer, he turned up at Southport. What was he there for? Well, less than a minute, straight in the van.
Yeah.
If Reform would have gone up there, they would have done it more dignified, more this, and spoke to the people.
OK, but that's not the point.
He needs his security.
He does. I think it's an absolute outrage that he hasn't all this time had security provided by the state, given that it is because he's a prominent political figure and his views are perfectly reasonable, legitimate, everything, and not that should even matter. And he's faced threats. I know personally the threats he faces. I've spent time around and know the measures and the security he has to have, and it's very expensive. And I early on, when we were told there's been money funded, £500 gift to pay for his security, but he's also calling this a reward. He's calling it a gift. The point is, should he have declared this money?
He probably should.
He says he shouldn't have.
He probably should, and he probably realises that now. But I will ask you one question.
Yeah.
Starmer and Irma need to be investigated on how much they have made out of the Chagos fiasco, because I bet you any money they have made at least double that.
That's a very big allegation. I'm sure on behalf of Starmer and Homer, for legal reasons, I have to say, I'm sure they have. They would deny any such allegations. But again, a lot of questions about basically, acting for government and at the same time as have previously acted for people who were suing the government has been an issue, certainly for Lord Hermer. I mean, I tell you what, though, the best news also will be with Starmer going is Bezzy, mate, the Attorney General, going would be a good thing. But I say, I'm sure they would deny that allegation from Dave. Your complaints into him, not to me. Up next, we're going to take the latest headlines. We're going to be talking about all of the big stories in news, including Nicola Sturgeon's husband being sentenced to more than 5 years behind bars for embezzlement of £400,000 of SNP funds. That's up next. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 11. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you as always for your company. If you've missed anything from the show, if you missed my pretty lengthy interview with Nigel Farage in the last hour, do have a look at that. It was the top of the hour. You can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, putting some clips out on X as well. Do hit subscribe on the YouTube page and we never have to miss a thing. Now we're going to be discussing more about whether or not Andy Burnham is actually set for a coronation as Prime Minister after Keir Starmer bowed to pressure and finally resigned yesterday. Woohoo! But reports suggesting at least 2 senior Labour MPs are considering launching leadership bids. Darren Jones and Al Carnes. We'll see about that. Andy Burnham's team has ruled out an early election, a big snap election, if he does have a bounce in the polls and he becomes Prime Minister, despite calls from both Reform UK, reiterated by Nigel Farage today, and the Conservatives to hold one. Whether both of those parties are actually ready to hold an election right now, I think is rather doubtful. Plus, we're also marking today as the 10-year anniversary of the day that Britain voted to leave the EU. Happy Independence Day, everybody. I'm not wearing my Union Jack dress because I'm really not sure it fits anymore. Not sure it fitted on the day, but there we are. Henry Hill is joining us. He's political editor of The Critic. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
The question we're asking our audience today, although a lot of people getting in touch about Nigel Farage interview, getting in touch about anything and everything, you want to get in touch about Brexit, your happy memories of when we voted to leave, how involved were you? Do you think it's been a success or a failure? Are you worried about, Mr. Rejoiner, Andy Burnham, becoming Prime Minister? He's as bad as Andy Burnham when it comes to this issue, saying he wants to rejoin at some point in his lifetime. OK, lifetime, fair enough. My view is if people want to vote for it, but you have to have a mandate from a general election, then you hold a referendum. Oh, and then, of course, the Brexiteers can all fight the result if we lose, because apparently that's what we do now in a democracy. But mostly I want to hear from you on Andy Burnham, because he does look like he is going to be our next Prime Minister, and in a matter of weeks, if there is no leadership contest, he could be our PM on the 17th of July. What do you think a Burnham government will do? So far on the text, not very much from what I can gather, but give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls to charge the national rate. Text costs 1. Standard network rate message. Well, before I put that question to you, Henry Hill, just in terms of, we talked, obviously, we're on air when, covering the Prime Minister's departure yesterday. He, of course, is still in Downing Street, licking his wounds, I believe, not being honourable or anything, not crying, just being absolutely furious at the betrayal he's had. I think they've had a cabinet meeting this morning that went ahead, which would, by the way, have been a cabinet who would have resigned, most of them, if he hadn't gone yesterday. Dragged, kicking, screaming from office, good riddance. But him having to watch, what was going on in the scenes in the House of Commons, the big cheers for Andy Burnham when he arrived, unusually wearing a suit and tie. Thanks, Andy. And then, of course, that selfie in Westminster Hall. I mean, even seeing his own cabinet ministers in that hall, OK, you'd support a new MP who's won a big resounding victory in a by-election, but nevertheless, the king is dead, long live the king.
I mean, it's one of the really cruel things about politics, especially right at the top, is that one day you're the most important person in Britain in some respects, and certainly with regards to all of your colleagues, you have complete control over their promotion prospects, their career, and then all of a sudden, turn of a page, nobody cares what you think. You're still in the room.
No one's calling.
You're still in the chair. You've still got the driver for a bit, but no one cares what you think. And they're all off fating the next person. It is... Sometimes I think we rightly often give journalists, politicians a very hard time. So do the voters. That's their prerogative. But I do think that sometimes it's worth remembering just how extraordinarily brutal
it's very cruel.
Can be.
And even at election time, I mean, moving van that day, get the heck out. I mean, there is an argument for a little period of transition. I don't think the 3 months that the Americans have. I mean, to a certain extent, in countries like Germany, where they've got PR, and everyone says, it's such a more democratic system. I mean, it's not. It's a different democratic system. The Germans take, and the Belgians, when they take 3 months to put a government together, for goodness sake, that is not democracy in my view. But here's the thing. the Prime Minister laid out a process, and we don't even get nominations opening to be the next leader of the Labour Party until the 9th of July. That's in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah.
And then they don't close until the 16th, and then the 17th, if there's no other contender other than Andy Burnham, who we're told has, not just of the 400, best part of 300 people supporting him. If there isn't anyone who's running against him, then there's no contest that goes to the party membership, and so no longer a delay. You don't have to wait until September to get a result. He will become Prime Minister. But word is he doesn't really want the job that soon. He's still putting a team together. He's still trying to work out plans, and there's a lot of people now saying, nice of the media to step up and do their job for a change, that perhaps we need to have some sort of a plan for us to analyse. Now, there was not enough scrutiny of the manifesto for the Labour Party last time round in 2024, when everyone knew they were heads on to win. Perhaps not that big majority, but certainly a majority. We obviously on this show, and again the likes of Paul Johnson then at the Institute of Fiscal Studies, well, all being very clear that neither Labour's nor Tories' numbers added up. No question at all. Everyone was basically, we're not going to raise taxes, and they probably were. But it's not like we're not quite sure what he's going to do. Keir Starmer had been leader of the opposition for 4 years. He had been scrutinised. He'd faced scrutiny to become the leader of the Labour Party, although, of course, he ran on a very different ticket for that than he did in 24 as a Prime Minister. There's been no scrutiny of Andy Burnham, and one of the reasons there hasn't been is there's nothing to scrutinise. There is no track record. There are no statements on very little. He is Mr. Flip-Flop, Andy. We don't know what his defence policy be. Prime Minister, by all accounts, is going to announce a defence investment plan before he leaves.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, whether that's the full money that John Healey would have wanted or not is another matter. In which case, you could have offered that before, mate. But we don't know what his policy on welfare will be. We don't know what his policy on health will be, on education. I mean, he's made various statements. We know he's pro-EU, but he said he wouldn't try and push us out back into the EU. And he wouldn't be able to. He's been typical Labour lefty on issues like trans, where you don't understand why it's not a contentious issue. Why can't trans women be in the same toilets as women? Because they're not women is the answer, Andy. But he's tried to be all things for all men, but he's not faced proper scrutiny because he's a popular mayor.
Yeah, and I think it's actually interesting the number of parallels there are with Boris Johnson. You made the comparison earlier. Obviously, popular mayor in a job that doesn't really prepare you for Downing Street. But also, he has one of Boris Johnson's biggest weaknesses, which is this deep, deep need to be liked.
Yes,
and that is a serious flaw in a politician. Obviously, politicians need to win over the voters. But if you need to be liked, then you get what you get with Burnham, or indeed with Boris, which is where he just says yes in whatever room he's in. Yeah. Right? And we've seen this over and over again during his leadership campaign, such as, well, not, procession, where he's been like, oh, well, maybe I would compensate the WASPy women. And like, no, actually, no, I won't, because somebody who understands the numbers has talked to me about this. And he's done this time and time again. And it is, and I like Andy Burnham as a person. Like you.
He's very personable. Yeah. He's a nice bloke. He's fun.
But it is remarkable that you have a man here who has clearly been positioning himself to run for the leadership of the Labour Party and thus Prime Minister for months, and is now arguing that if the Prime Minister goes too quickly, he won't have a... Surely, if you wanted to be Prime Minister, if I wanted to be Prime Minister and I was actively engineering a by-election, I would be burning with what I wanted to do with that post.
But not just have some ideas of it, but why do you want to be Prime Minister? Yes. I think a lot of people want to be Prime... I mean, what do you want to be Prime Minister to do?
I honestly don't understand why people want to be Prime Minister at the moment. It is literally a miserable job where everyone will hate you because all of the choices are bad.
Do you know what, though? No, actually, I would like to be Prime Minister, but on the basis I would say I will run for one time. I will never stand for re-election. I don't have to worry about being popular. But this is the deal. This is what we're going to do. Because actually, and I think this is also true of Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage and their parties, as well as, I mean, the madness on the left side, is that there are a lot of very tough choices that do have to be made. And if we also, you can't sit there and go, we need to spend more on defence and not say where the money's coming from. OK, it's going to come from welfare. Well, a lot of those people are not going to be able to get jobs if you haven't got growth. So there are lots of things you need to do. And you probably do need to spend quite a bit to get the ball rolling, in literally investment money, But there's loads of things. I mean, but generally, I could give you between 20, 30, 40 policies, you know, tomorrow, or what I would want to do, what would my priorities be? And I think that so many of the majority don't. I mean, again, you know, you need to stop mass legal immigration because you've got to get our own young British people to work, and they can't compete with those cheaper workers from abroad, you know, who live, you know, 10 in a house. We have that when you know, Polish builders and the like. You need to make the welfare. I mean, again, I want people to have decent welfare payments if they need them, but I don't want you to be eligible for a penny if you don't need them. I don't think that's controversial. I think that's pretty much what the welfare state was supposed to be about. And I'm pretty much, you know, you've got 2 weeks to find a job, off you go. Which is what I would be like with my kid if she didn't work. I mean, I'm sorry, I just think we need to have a bit of tough love here. But a lot of these people are just simply not equipped to find a job. We're going to have to train these people up. But, I mean, it's going to be non-negotiable, by the way. I mean, it's orange jumpsuit, non-negotiable time. I would bring in, if you ain't in work, you can be in conscripted, and you will do as you're told, because a hell of a lot of your human rights are gone at that point. No, we're going to have to be very serious about defence, about cutting welfare, dropping the net zero, tackling the illegal migration as well. Again, I would absolutely, I would round up every single person who's here illegally. If you're in camps, well, I'm sorry, we've got plenty of people not at work now who can build those camps. They won't be very pleasant, and you can leave at any time, but you ain't leaving to be on our streets. You're gone. Bye-bye. Don't care where you go, but you're not here. Mass deportations. I think there is so much to do. I think it's a 24-hour-a-day job for 4 years, and you still could achieve all of it, but you could set the country on the right road. You would do things. You would reform some of the pension stuff, state age for pension, things like that. There's lots of stuff that everyone has been care for dementia and the like. There's so much stuff that politicians who live on not just a 4 or 5 year news cycle, but a 24-hour news cycle, have kicked into the long grass, that someone needs to grasp the nettle and says, I think like Margaret Thatcher used to do, I don't care if this is popular, it's what needs to be done. And you can slag me off on the BBC or in The Guardian, or indeed in The Telegraph or The Times. I don't care, it's what needs to be done, and we're going to get the job done. And I would love someone to come in and do that. I don't have personally. I would have the guts to do it. I'd have the backbone to do it. I don't think I've got the managerial or the leadership skills to do it. Otherwise, genuinely, I'd put myself up for it. I really would. But I just think that's a rare combination of skills that someone needs to have. And we need someone who's a leader. We need someone who can just say, guys, this is going to be costly. And sometimes this is going to go up, and it's going to be hard for a lot of people. But we need to do this. And then I promise you that in 5-10 years' time, it's going to be better and it's going to make a difference. I think the British people would sign up to that.
I think the challenge, though, is that you don't need just one of those people. You need more than 300 of those people because of Parliament, right? I've actually had this debate with Tory MPs. MPs are now less loyal than they've ever been. They're less willing to follow the whip. Now, you think back to Margaret Thatcher, right? In the early 1980s, deeply, deeply unpopular, well behind in the polls. And a lot of her party had never expected her to be leader and had no intention of her being leader and didn't like her programme.
This is a rather ridiculous woman who somehow got
they still went through the division lobbies for her programme because that is just what you did, especially if you were a Conservative MP. These days, I genuinely don't know if Margaret Thatcher would be able to deliver Margaret Thatcher's programme in the sort of 80-81 period, right? And that's the problem.
That is a very, very good point. In terms of, what we're going to expect from Andy Burnham, what do we know that he's going to do?
I mean, very little.
It's a short conversation?
Very little. Let me try and come up with some kind of answer. So one of the things he likes talking about is public ownership, right? You know, nationalising things, which is, Labour's been doing this a bit in this government, and it's a bit of a conjuring trick because it sounds really substantial. You know,
and it's very popular in the polls.
Indeed.
Polling, even among Tory voters, is popular.
Indeed. You know, so they say they've renationalised the railways, right? Sounds impressive. But actually, the railways have been functionally never privatised, right? The track and stations owned by Network Rail, all of the timetables set by the DfT. The only thing is that
the pay has to be overseen.
If you're a train operating company and you want to add one carriage to one train, you need to get sign-off from civil servants in the Department for Transport, right? Like it's not been privatised. The only thing we've been doing is selling the right to put your name on the side of the trains, right?
But they make some profits on the sausage rolls.
And they've ended that and they've called it nationalisation. He talks about water, right? Now, again, you raised this earlier. Nationalising water was done very badly, right? Privatising water was done very badly. But even so, the reason that water bills have gone up is because of the bit that has gone well, which is that water companies are required to reinvest a share of their profits in water infrastructure, right? That level of investment is several times higher than it was under nationalisation.
Here's the thing, if you add 10 million people to the population, you might need more water. And also everyone's got power showers and hot tubs and you know, and the good things. I mean, it's amazing how 10 million more people in the country might have greater water
Here's
needs.
what happens under nationalisation. The politicians hold down the rates because it's politically popular. That means that you don't get the revenue that you need to make the investments, and everything slowly gets worse.
And then you can, I mean, that's the idea that that's going to change anyone's life overnight is quite absurd. I mean, anything else? We know he talks about social justice.
So, I mean, honestly...
What is that out of interest?
Social justice is the idea that you just make things fair in a way that's almost entirely arbitrary and made up by people.
That's the state getting involved in things.
Exactly. So it's an interesting philosophical distinction between the left and the right often. Sorry, no, you go on.
No, carry on.
So, so Roger Scruton had a great thing about this, which is where he said that being born poor is unfortunate, but it's not unjust. And that is a distinction where basically they argue that your starting point in life, you should be equality, and if it's not equal, that is unjust and needs correcting, which is a basic left-wing position.
How dare your parents have worked hard? Or
It's just the same. It's just a new language used for exactly the same policies. And I suspect that what will happen is what happens with Labour when there's not lots of new money to spend, which is that they like banning things, they like constitutional reform, and they like regulation that doesn't involve spending money up front. And so that's where I think we'll end up.
Great, that's going to go well, isn't it? Social media bans and all of that. There's talk about Wes Streeting being tipped as a favourite to become Chancellor. A lot of concern about Ed Miliband. I mean, genuinely, if he points Ed Miliband, just start packing now, call the removal lawyers. Starmer allies are urging the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, that he's one of those men who comes out and he's really, I mean, totally loyal to run against Burnham. I mean, Wes Streeting, we know, hasn't got the numbers. I mean, come on, he would have run otherwise. Darren Jones possibly running. Al Carnes could still be considering a run. I was speaking to him. He was on the show the other week, and then I spoke to him at an event last week, and he was certainly not denying it. But again, they're not going to win. So whether we get, we might have a coronation and a bit more of a contest, but realistically, I mean, Darren Jones isn't going to win. I mean, I'd find this quite laughable. So realistically, Wes Streeting is going to be in office, head of party conferences. Do you think there's going to be a big bounce?
There will be some bounce. Andy Burnham is very popular. Right? And a lot of people, because politicians and some journalists keep saying it, genuinely seem to think that this government's unpopularity is just because of Sir Keir Starmer's personal failings.
Bad communication, as opposed to every policy he announced.
But at some point, Andy Burnham is going to have to raise taxes.
Let's also talk about, small matter, of Peter Murrell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, estranged husband. She said former husband. I don't think they're actually divorced yet. That would be a public document, surely. Being sentenced to 5 years and 3 months behind bars for embezzlement of £400,000 of SNP funds. He won't serve 5 years, of course, and I'm sure we'll get a lovely cushy number. But I mean, if he pleaded guilty, eventually bang to rights, so he'll have less time behind bars than if he had gone to trial. But what I think most people find utterly extraordinary is the idea that Nicola Sturgeon knew not a thing, despite a huge number of these items were bought for her, some of them extraordinarily expensive items. Clearly, I mean, things like sort of fancy hairdryers. I mean, he was bald, for goodness sake. He didn't need a hairdryer, one or two of them. £4,000 coffee machines and the like. And, of course, she knew what she was earning. She knew what he was earning. And if my husband started coming home with, tens of thousands of pounds worth of things. If there was a camper van costing 120 grand sitting outside his mum's house, apparently with 4 miles on the clock, I think I might be asking some questions. The whole thing is utterly bizarre, but she seems to have, I'm going to use a technical term here, got away with it.
Twice. I mean, this is during the Alex Salmond scandal a few years ago. I don't know how many listeners will remember that. She once again managed to make the argument that she didn't know anything about the party business that was being discussed in her living room because she and her husband apparently had complete firewalls. In this case, she donated it was always the little things she donated a pair of shoes worth a few £100s to an SNP fundraiser and then watched her husband buy them back for several £1,000s. And if you've been in any kind of household or shared arrangement,
what the hell have you just done?
You know what you're bringing in, right? If your partner is suddenly bringing in hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of luxury products, you ask questions.
I mean, I'm sorry, it's just utterly bizarre. It really is. Let's talk about two more things, rather important things. A little bit later in the show, we'll be talking about our World Cup match, big match for England. England v Ghana tonight. More of these ridiculous hydration breaks. I was watching France Iraq last night. I'm thinking, I've got a funny feeling the Iraqis have played football matches in hotter weather than this. But yeah, I love that. I mean, England fans were just booing last time. I'm sure they will again. But England v Ghana, you're hopeful?
I think, well, I did see that some Ghanaian witch doctor has apparently cursed our team.
Oops.
But unless that magic is real, I think we probably have a decent shot against Ghana.
But don't you think we're going to be the ones needing the hydration breaks, given the weather we're going to be facing tonight at 10 p.m. at kick-off?
It does seem incredible that the football players are going to be in a luckier position than us.
It does. A rare red weather warning for extreme heat has been issued by the Met Office. This is over 3 days. It was sweltering yesterday. Thunderstorms over the West Country overnight, yesterday evening and overnight in the southeast. I mean, really epic thunderstorms for hours on end. Temperatures could soar to 40 degrees Celsius. The big deal they're saying is, we're under this heat dome. The whole of Europe is. Lots of red on the maps, very scary. And this is very unusual for June. I mean, but also any chance to go on and on about climate change is freak weather. We've always had freak weather. I mean, 1976, I was living in the Midwest of America. We had 120 plus Fahrenheit. It was Fahrenheit in those days. I think that's about, exactly. I think it was about 47 degrees every day for months. And we were actually, April, they had to close all the schools because it was just physically not safe to be in the schools. That was 76, but, we have freak weather, don't we?
I think we do get used in Britain to our kind of living in Tupperware, where all of the weather is in a certain range and the sky is always grey. Of course, the thing that's really ridiculous about this is that they'll be like, oh, look, all this extreme weather. And 40 is, quite dangerous for some people.
Yeah.
But then they'll insist on upholding the ban on air conditioning.
Yes.
If you think that a 40-degree weather in London is dangerous, and it might be to some people...
And that it's going to continue because of global warming.
Right, exactly. And it might be dangerous for some people. It's important to make that clear. Legalise air conditioning.
Yeah, but it is legal in new buildings. It is extraordinary. I mean, that is just the classic. They don't really believe it, and it's like all these, all these people some of these big climate leaders, the big millionaires, former politicians in America, who go on about the seas are rising and everything, and then they've all got beachfront properties around me. Give me a break, guys. Come on, no one takes you seriously. It is freak weather. We get freak weather. That's what happens. Weather is weather. And anyway, this global temperature change, we're talking about increasing by 0.5%. Sorry, that's not 0.5% chance. Oh, no, but it's going to create more unusual weather. If it's hot, it's climate change. If it's cold in June, it's climate change. If it's raining, it's climate change. If there's no rain, it's climate change. They're always going to say it's climate change. Somehow, most of us are going to survive. And by the way, people will die as a result of heat. Two people in France, because kids were left in a car, in a boiling hot car. Dogs die in those situations. Elderly people, sadly, who are likely to die fairly soon, will often succumb in hot weather in the same way they do in cold weather. But 9 out of 10 people who die from weather extremes or during weather extremes die in the cold, not in the heat. So overall, put a fan on, drink lots of water, stay in the shade, close the windows until sort of 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll get through it because human beings survive this stuff. Can everyone just relax? I'm just relieved the aircon's working today in the studio. 11:25 is the time. We're going to get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000 is a number for you to call. We want to talk about Brexit, about Nigel Farage in that interview, Andy Burnham. What do you think a Burnham government will look like and what it will do? And coming up after that, we're going to be talking to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. This is Talk.
ashamed of is the English flag. Scottish flag, fine. Welsh flag, fine. Irish, everything like that's marvellous. But no. We can't be English. And this has been going on for a long, long time.
He would be Prime Minister of the most toxic political brand in the country at the moment, which is Labour. And that is what we will be battling against.
Our Prime Minister is allegedly attacked by another nation and nothing is said.
This is a reminder that Russia regards the United Kingdom as a hostile power.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Sandy's done that. She's in Suffolk. Hello, Sandy. How are you?
Morning, Julia. I'm well, thank you.
Coping with the heat? Did you get the storms last night?
No, we didn't have storms, but I love it, and that's why I'm always escaping on holiday, so I can have more of it.
We do pay to go places this hot on holiday, don't we? It's different when you're by the sea. It is. But anyway, Sandy, what do you want to talk about?
I want you to talk about the failures of Brexit and who I want to lay the blame upon for that. So can I just start with the fact that Spanish people are allowed to spend 6 months of every year in the UK, but we're only allowed to spend 90 days in Spain.
You can apply for a visa.
Yep, you can. But I just think it wouldn't have been beyond the wit of man to have agreed a more equal deal.
I mean, I didn't realise they were allowed to do that, but there we are. Can someone look that up?
And the other point, Julia, is did you know this, that France are allowed to take 1,400 tonnes of fish a year from British waters? But the UK, we're only allowed to take 150 tonnes from our own waters.
I mean,
that therefore means we have to import 80% of our seafood. And I just maintain if Nigel Farage had been in charge of the Brexit negotiations, a better deal would have been done for our fishermen.
Well, exactly. Oh, I mean, everything. And Nigel, and Keir Starmer, by the way, extended it, didn't he, by another 12 years? I mean, everyone just went, even the EU were going, really? Are you sure? We thought you were joking. But this is the thing, because, I mean, Theresa May basically tied even Boris Johnson by the time he got to do that final deal to get voted in to get Brexit done. His hands were already tied by what had already been agreed. Even the timetable of what they would discuss, instead of making it one whole big package deal, had been agreed by Theresa May and her bleeding useless people. Ollie Robbins, he's come up again lately. It seems like he's rubbish at everything he does, isn't he?
He is. I mean, another point I wanted to make, and this is probably only down to my own naivety, is I voted for Brexit. But had I known then what I know now, I might have changed my mind, because I naively thought that by voting for Brexit, it would immediately mean we didn't have to comply with all these European laws. How wrong was I?
Oh, well, yeah, there were very... I mean, say, you're the first person who I know who voted for Brexit who's actually... No, I mean, spoken to on the phone, who's actually said they would have a second thought on that. They were very clear that it would take time to move. They weren't going to just get rid of all the laws overnight, because all our laws for 40-odd years had been made effective by the EU. You can't just do that overnight. But we never actually extricated ourselves.
10 years isn't overnight. 10 years isn't overnight, is it?
You make a very fair point. Sandy, I mean, again, they should have done a better deal. But, at the end of the day, we now have completely direct elected government who don't get to pass all the blame onto the EU, and we can boot them out, and we do if they don't do what they say they're going to do. Sandy, I appreciate your call. Thank you. Let's squeeze in Ben in Essex. Ben, you want to talk about Andy Burnham. What do you think he's going to do as PM?
Do you know what, Julia? I don't know what he's going to do, but I just hope that he does all the things Keir Starmer doesn't. I mean, he has got a fantastic opportunity now to really prove himself and turn this country around and be a success.
Oh, I mean, I'd love it if he was. I felt that about Keir Starmer. Could we look? Prove me wrong, please.
Exactly. You know, he could bring back Labour and the confidence. And do you know what? I really hope he does, because, I mean, please, for God's sake, don't come out and call us all far right. You know, sort the benefits out, spend money on defence, do all the things that we're crying out to do, and he will win. He'll win the confidence of the public.
Do you think he's able or wanting to do any of that?
I don't think he is. No, I just think he's Keir Starmer in a polo top. But do you know what? I really hope that he proves us all wrong. I don't want him to fail. I want him to do well.
I completely agree. And I said that after Keir Starmer came into office as well. It's an all-round... First and foremost, you know, I haven't got any party allegiance anyway, but I've got my political views, as you'll well know. But I'm British, first and foremost, and I want this country to be everything it can be. And my God, we need a leader who can do that. I just fear that he's not the one. But, hey, I'm with you, Ben. If he can deliver... Fingers crossed, eh? 11:33 is the time. We'll put that to our next guest in just a couple of moments. Ian Duncan-Smith, former leader of the Conservatives. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Going to talk to Ian Duncan-Smith in just a couple of moments. Henry Hill, political editor of The Critic, is still with us. Henry, it's really interesting what that last caller had to say, Ben, about, you know, he wants a great opportunity. Any new Prime Minister is an opportunity. And again, it's amazing how some people who get, the mantle of being the Prime Minister, and they kind of grow into it, they become statesmanlike, and some people, it just sort of, it weighs too heavily on their shoulders. And I think that was certainly the case for Keir Starmer, that actually he just really wasn't up to it. I was with someone last night, he's a lawyer, and someone who worked with Andy Burnham, Keir Starmer, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. And he never made a decision, just couldn't make a decision about anything. And look at that, that's what we saw with him in Number 10. And they make these rash decisions that weren't backed up and weren't in the manifesto. Do you think there is, a possibility? We don't know what Andy Burnham's policies are going to be like. We don't know how the Prime Minister's job will sit on his shoulders. But there's always the potential for someone to be a great Prime Minister and to deliver. I mean, and that would be a good thing, wouldn't it?
I'd really like it to be true, because I live in this country, right?
Don't want to move.
Exactly. I don't. Exactly. If we have another bad Prime Minister and another bad government and another few years of everything getting worse, taxes going up, that's miserable for me and for everybody that I know and like, and for the country as a whole. So I think, yes, of course I want him to be a good Prime Minister. I would be delighted if I turned out to be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't see much evidence from his career to date that this is the case. I think that being a Prime Minister, and indeed any position of executive leadership, simply requires a set of skills which is actually quite hard to test for until you've had that kind of role, right? It doesn't matter how good you are as number two, because it's not a question of diligence and application. Sometimes you get lots of people like, well, they're a very effective minister. Fine. Being an effective minister and being Prime Minister are in many ways completely different jobs. And we've not seen
the range of things you need to know about and think about.
And you need to have a clear idea of what you want to do, the ability to take people with you. You need to lead rather than follow.
A strong team.
These things, exactly, and none of these things are in evidence.
Yeah.
But We could be wrong, and I really hope we are.
We are. I mean, Keir Starmer had none of those, I think we can safely say. He obviously chose people badly, who you know, and who all over the place. And that's the thing. Some of the people who were surrounding Andy Burnham, I've got big question marks about. I mean, you know, his big buddy, his big mate, Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband is stark, staring, insane, climate hysteric. You may as well put Greta Thunberg in charge of whatever job he's doing if he, God forbid, he gets Chancellor. I mean, it'll be funny. I mean, it'll be funny until the whole country crashes. You know, I mean, Louise Haigh, she had to resign because she'd lied about the fact that she'd had a conviction for fraud when she basically told the company she'd worked for years ago that her phone was stolen and it wasn't stolen. I mean, at one point her name was being touted for Chancellor. You know, are you bleeding kidding me? I mean, this is totally untenable. It's a party, and I take it from a Conservative, it is that awful curse, unity. It is somebody whose top priority is uniting the party, bringing all the factions in. And it's like, no, actually, the whole reason you're in this mess is because you need to have fights. You need to have internal rows. But also, unity about what? Well, let's talk to someone who's been there when it comes to being in government, if not in the top job, but has led the Conservative Party. So Ian Duncan-Smith, who joins us right now. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Well, sorry, apologies.
I apologise for the delay because we caught up with the system here.
Don't worry at all. We can blame it on the heat. It's much easier. Blame game is much easier. I've just got to get your thoughts, first of all, on the departure of Keir Starmer yesterday, although he's still around for a little bit, maybe around for rather less long than he had planned himself, and indeed than Andy Burnham had planned, because it does look like, so far, we're going to get a coronation for Andy Burnham, and he could be our next Prime Minister as early as the 17th of July. What do you make of the handing over of the reins, and do you think things are going to get any better?
Well, I listened to Keir Starmer yesterday when he came out, and it looked to me like, I thought for a moment he was saying that he was going to challenge Andy Burnham because he made the case for why he was so brilliant. We all have our own views about that, but it was certainly not a kind of I failed, that's why I've had to go. It was I succeeded, basically you don't want me anymore. And that was that.
More really. Fool you, yes.
Yeah, it was kind of bizarre, really. With Andy Burnham, I've known him for years. We used to play football together. I've, been around with him in Parliament quite a long time. I always go on very well with him. He's very personable in that regard. But we're not dealing with a personality sort of competition. We're dealing with who can lead a government and do the things that are necessary, such as, for example, reducing welfare spending and trying to help us defend ourselves against threats from Russia and from China and from Iran, etc. So the big question is, there's no change to the nature of the economy. He inherits a mess. And the mess is higher taxes, higher borrowing at higher borrowing rates than we've had before, far higher than when Liz Truss was in, by the way, it has to be said, on the bond market. And all of this is a mess that he will confront. So there's no, moment where Messiah steps forward and says, with one sweep of my hand, we are free. You're not. You're tied down, and you're tied down by what's happened before. And so my concern about this is, there's been no testing of Andy Burnham's beliefs, his views, his policies. So he wasn't elected at the time that the manifesto was agreed to by the British people. So he doesn't have a commitment to the manifesto, which is bizarre. And at the same time, we now know nothing more about what his clear idea is. For example, in one moment he was clear he wanted to be back in the EU. The next time on campaign, no. And then there was all the business about the bond market. We shouldn't be tied by the bond market. Then, we should understand that. Didn't really mean that. And so on and so forth.
Must be women. Immoral not to give them the 10 billion, but no, we're not going to do that. But this is the thing, a lot of people are making this point, we have no idea. The thing is, when you say, there's the 24 manifesto, and I know Tories and Reform are officially calling for there to be a general election, as Labour had done when you guys were changing your leader every 3 seconds. But we know there's no constitutional requirement for that. But it appeared to me that Keir Starmer wasn't particularly wedded to the 2024 manifesto, which was basically change. We never really found out what change was going to be what it would look like. Most of the policies that we remember him for weren't in the manifesto at all.
No, and that's because events crop up and you have to deal with events. And that's
Oh, no, I mean, no, winter fuel allowance wasn't an event. Most of them were completely forced errors.
Well, their manifesto was rather bland. It was like looking at a bland wallpaper and not being able to know where the beginning is or the end of it is, because it was mostly statements about things they want. The main thing is that you find with incoming Labour governments, they always talk about the change. We're going to change things. Yeah. And we've had change, but change for the worse. And now Andy Burnham's come in for the new change. So we have a change to the change that they came in when they wanted to change.
But does that mean we're going to go back to what was happening under the Tories, or we're going to change to the left or the right or forward?
That is why I take the view that at least there should be a challenge and at least there should be a debate. Because without the debate, we can't expose anybody who would be leading this country to know whether or not they're good enough.
But we understand that he is going to set out, for instance, next week, some economic policies, views. I think we're getting policies so far, and that we are going to be seeing, various big policy statements so that they can be tested. How much they are going to be tested by journalists is another question.
Well, yeah, and that's the whole point. The reason why politics is about debates, it's because you need to be able to stand up your argument in the force of others, in the face of others who simply don't agree with you. And the facts, the figures, and the nature of what you commit to are vitally important, and they need to be tested. The problem is when somebody comes in on a coronation like this, nothing has been tested. I mean, the Makerfield by-election was a sort of beauty contest, but apart from that and the rest of it, it means that we know little more about where Andy Burnham stands in the greater scheme of things on defence and on welfare, on taxation, on the fact that businesses now are in real difficulty because of the tax hike. Where does he stand on any of those things, which are very basic? And where is his views being tested by other politicians who say, well, what do you mean by all of that? How does that work? Which is what happens even in the leadership elections. At least the British public get a view.
And at least, again, Keir Starmer was leader of the opposition for 4 years, and we got to hear his point of view on the alternative. You mentioned defence there. Sort of some sources in Number 10 are saying that the Prime Minister, still in Number 10, Keir Starmer, is planning to announce the defence investment plan before he departs. So that's got to be in the next couple of weeks, realistically. That would basically tie the hands of any future Prime Minister and indeed Defence Secretary. Now, we don't know if that means he's going to deliver the sort of £28 billion rise that is what anyone who's got a clue seems to think would be, frankly, a bare minimum just to stand still, or in real terms, only £10 billion extra, which was so little that his own Defence Secretary, John Healey, and his Armed Forces Minister, Al Khans, resigned. What do you make of that decision?
Well, I don't know how he can do that now. He's not Prime Minister. He's just sitting there occupying the chair. He hasn't got any cabinet ministers that will support him. So he is now isolated in Downing Street. And to publish the Defence Investment Plan, having delayed it since last year, when we know very well he won't be here to justify it or to see it through, and Andy Burnham may well not agree with any of it or decide to change it. So it does seem to me completely bizarre that a caretaker Prime Minister is now trying to set down the tram lines for defence spending when we know from the resignations, as you pointed out, that the most critical people who are close to this have both resigned because they said it's ridiculous, it's not enough money, and it's completely weak. And so we know that already before they publish the damn thing. And I just simply say, how can they go ahead with this as though nothing has changed?
Can I ask you also, talking about money as well, the Chancellor, apparently he's deciding between 3 candidates to be his Chancellor. One of them, Shabana Mahmood, we understand, wants to remain as Home Secretary. So it's likely between Ed Miliband, the current Net Zero Secretary, and Wes Streeting, who resigned as Health Secretary. Do you have a preference?
Well, I have a preference for the one I don't want. The others...
Wonder if we can guess who that is.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid Ed Miliband, I do genuinely believe, would be an unmitigated disaster in the role. We've already seen that as a result of his huge spending and the money that's been shoved across to him from the Treasury, on the net zero nightmare that's going on with regards to the scale of which they're doing and the cost of energy. We know now, as a result of all of this, the cost of energy in the UK is 8 times more than that in the USA, and 4 times more, I understand, than the average of all the other developed countries. No wonder we can't make anything here. No wonder employers can't employ anybody, because on top of that, they're now targeted with the amount of cars in the car industry they have to produce that are electric, even though they've said people don't want to buy them. And so the problem we've got is government diktat, which sounds very much like communism to me.
Well, I mean, he does, like his Starmer, Andy Burnham calls himself a socialist. Let me ask you just finally about Peter Murrell. He is the former chief executive of the SNP in Scotland, and also, of course, the estranged husband of Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP leader and First Minister for many years. He has now been sentenced, jailed for 5 years and 3 months. Of course, we won't spend even half that time, realistically, behind bars for embezzlement of £400,000 of SNP funds donated by the general public. What do you make of that sentence, and do you still find it surprising that Nicola Sturgeon herself claims that she knew nothing and has not faced any charges?
Well, the thing I find strangest of all, first of all, I think the sentence is right for many of the people that gave their money to the SNP. What I would love to know deeper is, why does the SNP so incompetent that they didn't have checks on the nature of the signing off?
Well, they did, and the people who were overseeing it refused to audit it and resigned, and then were attacked by the leadership for resigning when they said that the books don't add up.
Well, that's the point. Why do you not think that having checks and balances matters that much on the money, which is what the SNP had? The second bit of this really is, I'm not a lawyer, but I think most people would question this simple fact that if you live with somebody, if you are connected to them in the way that they were together, Nicola Sturgeon and her husband, it must have been a surprise to you that certain goods and things were turning up which were quite pricey. I mean, you can't really...
£85,000 Jaguar.
A Jaguar, and then, of course, the big motorhome. Yeah. I mean, these things are huge. And it just turns up on his mother's drive, and nobody says, oh, gosh, how did you get the money for that? No one asks questions. Isn't the same as being innocent. I think to say there should have been questions is why she never asked any questions about this or took any interest in the fact that her husband was suddenly a very wealthy man.
Indeed. So, Ian Douglas-Smith, great to talk to you, former Conservative Party. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to try and find out a little bit more about what the hell Andy Burnham will do if he becomes Prime Minister, from former Labour Party official Richard Power-Syed. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
What they're ashamed of is the English flag. Scottish flag, fine. Welsh flag, fine. Irish, everything like that's marvellous. But no. We can't be English. And this has been going on for a long, long time.
He would be Prime Minister of the most toxic political brand in the country at the moment, which is Labour. And that is what we will be battling against.
Our Prime Minister is allegedly attacked by another nation and nothing is said.
This is a reminder that Russia regards the United Kingdom as a hostile power.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It is coming up to 11:52. Let's talk a little bit more about what we might be getting from an Andy Burnham premiership, because let's face it, we don't know at all what we're going to get. Let's talk to former Labour Party official Richard Power Said, and hopefully he's got a better clue than we do. Very good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, Julia. I'm worried I'm going to disappoint you, because I'm not going to give it. If I've got any secret information, I'm not going to air it on Talk, but I can give you a little bit of a sense of what I've heard.
Isn't this a bit of a worry that it's going to be top secret information, what a man who's likely to be our Prime Minister in a few weeks wants to do? Tell us what you are allowed to tell us.
Well, I think the point is that most people make their decisions about who they support politically not on the basis of the small print, but rather on the basis of the broad approach and the broad strategy. And I think that somebody like Andy Burnham, who's really consistently said you need economic prosperity and you need social justice, you need growth, but you also need fairness. That's the broad approach that I think most people in this country want to see right now.
I'm just going to interject with an incisive political reaction to that. Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya. I mean, you literally just said mum and apple pie. We should have growth, but social. What does that mean? I'd like to live in a fair country where we all can all be a bit better off. Who doesn't want that? Do you think there are genuinely people in this country or people in politics who say, do you know what I really want? I really want no growth, and I don't want any social justice. I want injustice. That is nonsense. That is not a broad strategy.
Most people would look at the last few Tory governments and would say those are people who were really committed to making our society more unequal, and they were very successful at doing it. They wanted tax breaks and as much government support for the billionaires as possible, and they wanted to take away our public services from us.
The last Tory government saw the top 10% and the top 1% pay more tax, and quite rightly.
And they also subsidised them in all sorts of different ways. They ensured that their
the poor are
subsidised,
the middle class are subsidised. But okay, I just don't. I think that's mum and apple pie stuff. Give me some more. Okay, that's not wanting economic prosperity and social justice is not a strategy. It's rainbows and unicorns. What's the strategy? Give me a strategy. Give me an actual. What is the plan?
The thing we've been missing for a long time, and the thing that at Burnham is really clear needs to happen as fast as possible, even faster than it has under Starmer, is a return to supporting business investment by crowding it in with public investment. That you use the power of the state to get the economy going again, and that often means by the government borrowing, yes, but borrowing to invest. So you get an asset at the end of it. That's the kind of borrowing that bond markets are much more comfortable with, and it's the kind of borrowing which spurs economic growth. Okay. So that's a really key point. It's something that.
That was something that he was doing in Manchester, and then we're told. But here's the thing, though. I mean, do we think necessarily that the state is better than the market at deciding, for instance, where people want to live or how to build a factory or?
So it's not just about whether the state is better at making those decisions, it's about whether it's more effective investing in a way which encourages growth. And we've kind of got a bit of an experiment for this, right? We've got a natural experiment of all the different countries that responded to the 2008 financial crisis and the mid-2010s financial crisis in different ways. And the ones that responded with austerity, by and large, have done much worse over the following decade than the ones that responded with a stimulus. And that's not because the state is necessarily fantastic every time at choosing where to invest. It's because the state is really good at encouraging other investment to come along at the same time. And the thing is that doesn't just mean that you promote growth. It also means that you get higher tax receipts, and it means you can end up paying off your debts. And that's why overall, when you look at all the different countries together, you see that the ones that stimulated their economy are also actually the ones that have ended up being better off at paying off their debts.
There is also the argument, again, that actually the countries that had to go for austerity are the ones who were harder hit by that. We had a huge banking sector, and therefore we were harder hit, and therefore there were perhaps some different decisions to be taken. But let's not get... That's another argument on that, but let's not get waylaid by that. There are a lot of people who were saying, and we had a caller earlier, say, he's not a Burnham supporter, not a Labour supporter, but actually, he really hopes that Burnham does succeed. Does having a nice personality, being very personable, having the charisma which got him that, that selfie and that reaction in the House of Commons yesterday from Andy Burnham, does having those interpersonal skills that clearly Keir Starmer is abjectly lacking and always did lack, but it's really been thrown into, made very, very obvious while he's been Prime Minister. Is that going to be enough to deliver we keep hearing it, change the Andy Burnham after Keir Starmer is saying he wants to deliver? Is that going to be enough? Or do we actually need some very specific policies, and do we need to know them before he actually becomes Prime Minister?
Well, if anybody thinks that you change a country with a pleasant personality, then they need their head checked. I think we can all be confident about that. The thing is that Andy Burnham doesn't just have a nice personality, he also has a fantastic track record of achievement, and that's the thing that I think puts a lot of people, most people think that Manchester's done fantastically under his leadership. Yes.
Not necessarily all down to Andy Burnham, and running a city does not necessarily give you the experience to run a country. It's better than no experience, absolutely, and we've had plenty of Prime Ministers who've come in who've never run anything at all. Keir Starmer, OK, the Director of Public Prosecutions, but is that enough, given that we don't know what he thinks about, for instance, Manchester, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a defence policy or a welfare policy or a foreign policy or views on Israel. We don't know any of those things from Andy Burnham. The question I'm asking is, does Andy Burnham know those things? Has he got those ideas in his head and we've just not been told about them? Or has he not thought about those things?
I'm very confident that Andy Burnham thinks about these things quite a lot. The difference is, Julia, if he was out there spouting off on different policy platforms, policy areas constantly as a mayor, I think people would have said maybe stay in your lane.
Have you heard of Keir Starmer, of Sadiq Khan?
Say again?
Have you heard of Sadiq Khan?
I'm not saying that mayors shouldn't do that. I'm saying that the criticism that he would have had from people like you. I'm very happy with the idea that a mayor can choose either of those approaches. I think they've got every right to do it.
Okay.
I don't think it would be a good thing for our country if Burnham rushed out a kind of new policy prospectus in a matter of days. He's been focusing on winning Makefield, and now he's focusing on preparing for leadership. I think that's a great thing to do.
We shall see what happens. Richard, I hope we'll talk again very soon, find out a few more details from the former Labour Party official Richard Powell-Syed. Henry Hill up next after the news. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 2 minutes past midday, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, great to have your company. If you missed anything from the show, particularly if you missed my interview with Nigel Farage just at 10 o'clock sharp this morning, lots covered there. We did talk about that £5 million donation that he's in trouble for with the Standards and Privileges Committee in the House of Commons over that from a crypto millionaire in Thailand. If you want to hear that, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're discussing more about Andy Burnham being set for a coronation as Prime Minister after Keir Starmer finally resigned yesterday. What a happy moment that was for all of us. Wes Streeting is being tipped as Andy Burnham's Chancellor after ditching his own leadership ambitions, but could it still be Ed Miliband, God forbid? And the EU has proposed a Brexit reset summit, postponed the Brexit reset summit that was due to be held in July because officials believe Andy Burnham would be a softer negotiating opponent than Keir Starmer. I mean, good grief, Keir Starmer would have given away even his firstborn to get back into the EU. This, of course, coming on, of course, the 10th anniversary of the Brexit vote back in 2016. A wonderful, wonderful day. Don't forget also England, as if you would forget, England taking on Ghana tonight, 9 o'clock kickoff in their second World Cup fixture. We'll be getting the latest from our colleagues at TalkSport. Henry Hill, I'm delighted today, still joins us, political editor of the Critic. Just must bring you in after a very short conversation because Ian Duncan-Smith's had some tech problems, so we were delayed a bit. Conversation with Richard Power Said, who's a former Labour Party official. And it is interesting, and I wanted to talk to him about a bit of Brexit, but we didn't quite get there. But it's interesting when he talked about the broad strategy you're expecting. You're not going to expect specific policies right now from a man who'd be Prime Minister. I mean, you literally would in an election. What is your policy? What do you plan to do? But even when he was laying out the broad strategy that he understands from Andy Burnham, I mean, it literally was, butterflies, unicorns and rainbows.
Twirling towards freedom, as from The Simpsons. Yeah, it's fast. I think a useful rule for anyone who's trying to pass political speech is that the usefulness of a political statement is directly proportional to the amount of people who could reasonably disagree with it. So saying, I believe in growth and fairness. Right, OK, if you can find me somebody who's there being like, I want unfair growth now, fine, then...
And he was saying that's what the Tories delivered, he said.
Well, this is the other fascinating thing, where you've really got the Labour Party just building castles in the sky, because objectively, whether you think it was a good idea or not, the Conservative Party, over 14 years, did enormous work towards making this a more equal country, enormously increased taxes on higher earners, pushing up the minimum wage and the living wage far beyond the point of usefulness. To the point where the IFS... Well, they continued doing it, like right up until 2024, right? We now have higher levels of wage compression.
Getting people off welfare, which Ian Duncan-Smith, who we spoke to earlier, was very keen on.
Exactly.
And into jobs, so they're better off.
We have higher levels of wage compression than the Soviet Union did. Right. This country is, after 14 years of the Conservative Party basically doing whatever the Resolution Foundation told it to, in many ways a more equal country. And instead of dealing with that and confronting the problems that's caused, you have so many in the Labour Party who are just absolutely determined to run against a folk memory of the Conservative Party of the 1990s.
But also this idea that somehow, and we see this about Elon Musk being a trillionaire, and things like this whole idea that anyone who's very wealthy is clearly exploiting people and a crook. And with this absolute denigration of anyone who does well. What? So if someone comes, goes to a normal school, from a normal family, creates a business, employs loads of people, pays shed loads of tax, creates a product or a service that we all want to use and we happily pay for, and somehow they're exploiting everybody. And I'm like, all credit, as I always say about these millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, if it was that easy, we'd all have done it.
Right, exactly. And the other thing is, they're talking, but the reason that they're doing that is because they need easy targets, right? Yeah. Because they have convinced the public...
You're poor.
Yeah.
Because they're rich.
They've convinced the country that this country is rich because they say things like, we're the 6th largest economy in the world, and people hear that and they think it means richest. It doesn't mean richest at all. It's a completely different figure. But therefore...
Explain what it does mean.
So sixth largest just means that in gross terms, there's an awful lot of money going around our economy, right? Because we keep importing people into it, and so it gets bigger. There's more people, and therefore there's more money overall. Richest is measured by how much money there is per person. That's GDP per capita.
That has gone down.
It has, right? And so if GDP goes up...
Because if you bring in a load of people who are low-skilled, low-wage jobs, funnily enough, they don't knock contributors to the economy, and so we have to spend more money on them. Yeah.
And so the number of times...
It's almost like it wasn't a good idea.
The number of times politicians, they talk about GDP, and people think, oh, the economy's doing well. No. GDP per capita is the one you want, and that's been going the wrong way
but
for
not
years.
even just GDP per capita, but also, I mean, because, well, it can be per capita, but if a few billionaires have got most of the money, then that's news. You want to know how most ordinary people, you go out to work, what is their standard of living? Is it getting better? Can you afford to buy a home? Not a mansion, just an ordinary little, terraced house where you can have a garden, you can bring up kids. Can people afford to do that? This is, can you go on holiday once a year? that's what people are looking for.
But this, again, is where it's really counterproductive because, of course, high house prices push up GDP.
Yeah, of course, but actually make it impossible for anyone to get them. And also a lot of people who own houses want them to go up, whereas, in fact, you're just making it harder for your own children. So much to talk about. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. I want to hear your thoughts, not only on the fact that it is the 10th anniversary of the vote for Brexit. Andy Burnham looking set to get a coronation to be the next Prime Minister. Except you can get a coronation to be a Prime Minister. It kind of sounds wrong. But what do you think a Burnham government will do? Do you think Andy Burnham knows? That's the question. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls the charge to the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Now, all this week, we've had an amazing conference taking place in London. It's called the ARC Conference, which stands for the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, and frankly, an awful lot of very sensible people who we would very much agree with on many, many issues are speaking there. One of them, of course, is our firm favourite here on the show, Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. And she joins us live from the ARC Conference. A very, very good afternoon to you, Claire.
Good to talk to you, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just get straight down to it when it comes to Andy Burnham. I keep asking anybody and everybody, what do you think Andy Burnham's going to do when he's in government? Because I still don't have a clue.
I think the problem is that we're not sure that Andy Burnham has a clue, and that's always difficult. So he is undoubtedly a far better communicator than Keir Starmer. That's a low bar to beat. And it is also the case that he has been very successful in his locality. But we are facing such tremendous problems as a country. The idea that you can somehow export Manchesterism, Burnham, and so on, and make that work for the country is just for the, it's for the birds.
What is Manchesterism? Can you help us?
I mean, well, first of all, it requires giving away money rather than actually making any, somebody else's money. But it has been, actually, interestingly, allowing some houses to be built by bringing in commercial house builders. So I really like that bit. A lot of the transport stuff are quite small time subsidies, and it isn't clear to me that it's got any ideological coherence at all. It's entirely small scale in comparison with what we've got to face. Just let me give you one example. The Alan Milburn report that came out on that said that nearly 1 million young people are not in education or work or in training and are basically rotting on welfare and are not productively involved in society. That would require, and Milburn explains this, and he's a Labour politician who's written this, he says they would have to take a radical, revolutionary swathe of cuts in welfare or changes completely to the way welfare is organised. And of course that would be positive both financially for the country but also morally. Has Andy Burnham said a word? Right? Has he said a word anywhere, right? Saying we want fairness and growth, and I love young people, and I've got lots of lovely young people in the northwest at Makerfield. It's like that report only came out in the middle of the by-election build-up. What did he say? nout.
Yeah,
zilch.
That's kind of a big giveaway, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. You said about him, not having an ideological sort of coherence. A lot of people would say they don't want someone ideological. I thought that was one of the things with Keir Starmer. He's not ideological. I would have absolutely accepted someone who was competent, just practical, and got some stuff done that worked. But he didn't do that either. Why do you think ideology is so important?
Well, ideology is about saying this is the vision that I have for the country, and this is the vision that I have for the country, and it's quite important that everything I do fits in with this vision. And that vision, by the way, is one that you would want to be agreed with by the electorate. That's democracy for you. Because the difficulty with the way that we've got, what we've got at the moment is saying, I've got no ideology, I'll just work with what works, is what works for what and for who? How do you decide? I mean, it is ideological that we have identitarian politics completely dominating all our public services. And by the way, huge swathes of the population work in public services, and we saw the impact of that when the police adopted race plans in preference to policing as their priority in relation to Henry Novak, and that was just one example.
Yeah, indeed.
So what is, you could say, well, Andy Burnham doesn't care about that because he's not ideological, he just wants to do what works. Well, in order for policing to work, the leadership of the country, as in the Prime Minister, has to say to the police, just to use that as an example, put aside your activist commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion and focus on crime solving and so on and so forth, right?
That'd be a
you
mad
could say
idea.
that's an ideological intervention. Yeah, but you can't just
But you actually have to have a belief
to work. You have to explain how. Yeah, you have to understand
Well, that's
that.
it. I mean, looking at some of the priorities we've got, I mean, defence, huge big issue. We had, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, resigned a few weeks ago. We've understood this morning that the Prime Minister is planning to announce this long-awaited. I mean, we're waiting well over a year now for this Defence Investment Plan. This is the one that John Healey said wasn't enough. Only £10 billion extra money in cash terms. 28 billion apparently is what all the experts think we need to literally stand still. So it doesn't touch the side of it. By all accounts, the Prime Minister is planning to publish this defence investment plan before the NATO summit, which is on July the 7th in Turkey. I think we'd always expect it by then. But a lot of people thought, well, you're now just, in office, not in power. You'll leave it to Andy Burnham. By all accounts, Andy Burnham's allies this morning are now saying that actually it's outrageous for the Prime Minister to do this. He can't tie Andy Burnham's hands. So we're in a rather strange situation. We're in a holding pattern for the next few weeks. But what do you make of that?
Well, it's an indication of why I'm not as enthusiastically going into the House of Lords and joining in parliamentary debates, because I do feel as though we're absolutely going through the motions, and this is a slap across the face for the British electorate, because nobody's in charge, nobody knows what's going on. So this defence investment plan, which was so inadequate that leading members of the government and the cabinet resigned, as you've indicated, is now being kind of foisted on Andy Burnham. But the idea that Andy Burnham is furious, I mean, it's like sort of do me a favour. He could, of course, tell us what his investment plan is.
Yeah,
right?
good to know.
What does he intend to do? How much money? It would be very important for us to have a sense of where he was heading in relation to investment in defence. Because we know that, by the way, back to ideology, there's quite a lot of ideological resistance, not just economic resistance, to taking defence seriously in Labour ranks, who think that that is something that should be a low priority in preference to, I don't know, breakfast clubs, the usual.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
but
that's
also,
what I'm worried
how
about.
you pay for it. How do you borrow? Do you cut welfare?
Exactly.
It's going to be fascinating.
Exactly. And so that's one of the big arguments.
Who's your favourite for the job of Chancellor?
No, I haven't got... I can't begin to tell you I haven't got a favourite. But we all think, as long as it's not Miliband, Wes Streeting might get it, but I mean, he's hardly been at the top of his game in terms of principle, Wes Streeting, of late, has he? I mean, talk about going with the wind. And we all don't want Shabana Mahmood to get it, because we think that at least she is a teeny little bit trying to tackle the migration question. But again, back to sort of fundamentals, even though, and this is obviously Brexit Day, so it's important,
Yeah,
even
come to
though
that, yes.
this is a kind of feeble and rather belated attempt to take control of our borders via the Labour government and via Shabbat Mahmood, there's so much more going on here, because for me the biggest problem in terms of migration, both legal and illegal by the way, is the crisis of integration of so many people who've moved here. And we have a situation where the reason why people, the reason why there's any kind of populist surge here, the reason why people are so frustrated, why there's a real atmosphere of civil unrest sometimes, is because people feel as though they're being told that their values are not as important as keeping satisfied people who've got different values. And can you imagine that in the World Cup period, and I know you will have discussed this, in the World Cup period, that migration officers and border control are being told off by their bosses if they wear an England badge, that councils are taking down England flags in case it upsets the migrant community. And this is actually pitting migrants against people who are not migrants in this country. That's the divisive strategy.
And again, you wouldn't go to any other
where's
country
Andy Burnham on
that.
this?
Yeah, we haven't heard. Can I ask you?
Where's Andy Burnham on it? No idea.
No, they're indeed. I mean, it is interesting, actually. As Sadiq Khan, we know that Andy Burnham wanted to rejoin the EU. It's taken 10 years since we voted for Brexit, 52 to 48. I don't know about you. I woke up, I got a couple of hours kip, and I woke up the next morning, and I've got to be honest with you, it's still one of the top 5 days of my life in terms of general happiness. We spoke to Nigel Farage a little bit earlier, and obviously there are a lot of people who feel like we haven't delivered on Brexit as much as we could. But I know that there's also the fact that we are, seeing governments like the last Tory government turfed out largely because of issues of failure, things on like immigration, the like, that we now have full democratic accountability and national sovereignty now, which is something we didn't have before we left the EU, where they can't blame Brussels bureaucrats or what France's policy or Germany's preference or what Lithuania thinks about something, because we get to make our own policies. And when our politicians fail to deliver for us, we get to turf them out. That is a victory for Brexit, isn't it?
That is a huge Brexit victory. I mean, listen, Brexit was a fantastic day for democracy. It was part of a democratic revolution that so many people voted, and they voted fully, having done all the research. Millions of ordinary working class people went out and said, oh my God, the government have trusted us to make this hugely important constitutional change. We've got to find out what we think. And then when they looked at it, they said, we want to get out of this anti-democratic, top-down, transnational body. We want to take back control. And it wasn't just a slogan, they meant it. And I think they still do. And what was then discussed, and the joy of it, I remember one woman standing the next morning and she was like crying, said, I've never been on the winning side on anything ever. And we've got to remember what we were up against, because the whole establishment turned on anyone who just quite simply said they were going to vote leave and said, you absolutely ignorant, backward, racist Neanderthals. And then it got worse when we won. For 3 years, they tried to stop it. So, anyone wants to know why Brexit was a bit slow off the mark, but Brexit was never an end point, right? The establishment didn't want to put in place the mechanisms for accountability for our own domestic politicians to be answerable to the electorate. And in fact, that's what the EU's all about, ring-fencing decisions away from those pesky oiks who are the voters. And what we did with Brexit was say, we pesky oiks have got the chance to actually, guess what, hold you to account if you make a mess. Now, I say that with some irony because I'm in the House of Lords. I get all that. But generally, this was a victory. I do understand. But generally, this was a victory for people power. And one of the things that I think that was demonstrated by that was that those people who imagined politics before 2016 was brilliant, no, it wasn't. The status quo beforehand was what was being overturned.
Absolutely.
And now what Brexit has proved is that politics is not good enough, and we're going to carry on fighting so we actually get more democratic accountability at home.
I have to say, by the way, if we're going to have a House of Lords, I'd rather people like you were in it, that's for sure. Just one final question to you. We know that Andy Burnham was a Remainer, someone who wants to rejoin. He said only a few months ago, kept it poo-pooed it all at the Makerfield by-election. He wants to rejoin. He said in his lifetime. So he's not talking about trying to overturn it sort of tomorrow, like the Lib Dems, Davey, or the Greens want to do. But Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, he's called on Keir Starmer's successor, whoever it is, Andy Burnham, to basically rejoin the EU. He said Brexit was an act of enormous economic self-harm. This is 10 years on. He said it's damaged growth, reduced opportunities, left our country poorer. A decade on, and with rising global instability, the argument for the UK to rejoin the EU has never been stronger. Do you agree?
He's such a numpty, isn't he? Has he taken a look at the EU recently? The EU at the moment is actually being dogged by economic decline. They're paying the price for the even more draconian net zero policies that they've got in the European Union. And Germany, which was the powerhouse of the European Union, is actually struggling not to deindustrialise. And guess what else they've got? They've got massive problems of migration. Yeah. They now suddenly don't like, any of the EU countries don't like having open borders anymore because they're trying to close their borders. And there's also a massive growth in populist parties dissatisfied with what's happening in the EU. So the problem with all these British politicians who go, if only we could rejoin, all would be well, is they're out of date. They've got some nostalgic view of the EU that no longer exists. The EU's gone all a bit, well, Brexity, and we should have nothing to do with it. We should be friendly with European countries and definitely have solidarity with European citizens. That's not the same as joining the EU, which is an anti-democratic, top-down outrage.
Claire Fox, it's always a pleasure. I loved every second of that. Independent peer. She's also the director of the Academy of Ideas. And as you can hear, if you're watching, you'll be seeing me. She's live at a conference. It's the ARC conference. It's being held in London today. A lot of very sensible folk at that conference. I have to say, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship being held until actually the close of plays on Wednesday. I thought it was all we've got to close of plays on Wednesday. Henry Hill, political editor of The Critic, listening to that. I love that response back to Sadiq Khan. What a numpty. It is absolutely fascinating how many people who are die-hard Brexiteers, Remainers, I mean Ramoners, Rejoiners, whatever they're calling themselves this week. But it's almost like they've not seen anything that's happened in Europe in the last few years. They've just got their heads in the sand, haven't they?
I think one of the absolutely fascinating things about their line of argument is that they argued, I think often, not wrongly, that Brexiteers, before we left the EU, wildly overstated the role of the European Union in Britain's economic problems relative to all sorts of other things. But the problem with that argument is that if it's true, and it is, that also applies the other way. Yeah. It can't be the case that the European Union had nothing to do with Britain's economic problems before we left, but now has everything to do with our economic problems now. What happened is, I think you actually put it perfectly earlier, and I did say this to Tory MPs at the time, is that the public associated any problem we had previously with being in the EU. Yep. Now they associate it with having left the EU. Yeah. If we went back in...
It's actually mostly our government.
Exactly. If we went back in and didn't solve any of the other problems, they'd hate the European Union again.
Of course they would. Oh, by the way, we ain't going back in. No. Even if there was a referendum to vote to go back in, without the EU rebate, all the extra funds, and they would give us a punishment beating even more than they tried to over Brexit. There's no doubt at all. We're not voting to take on the euro, are we? Give me a break. It's never going to happen. Good luck, Sadiq Khan. Good luck, Burnham. Good luck, Keir Starmer. Never gonna happen. In a few moments, we're going to be talking to Lord David Frost. He was Boris Johnson's chief negotiator over Brexit. Find out what he thinks about it all in a few moments. First up, we're going to take a quick break there. We're going to take your calls. Find out what you think about, Brexit, 10th anniversary of that vote, and, of course, Andy Burnham. And we can't discuss too much about what Andy Burnham's going to do because we don't know. And we're pretty sure he doesn't either. This is Talk.
What they're ashamed of is the English flag. Scottish flag, fine. Welsh flag, fine. Irish, everything like that's marvellous. But no. We can't be English. And this has been going on for a long, long time.
He would be Prime Minister of the most toxic political brand in the country at the moment, which is Labour. And that is what we will be battling against.
Our Prime Minister is allegedly attacked by another nation and nothing is said.
This is a reminder that Russia regards the United Kingdom as a hostile power.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. James is in Penrith. He wants to talk about Andy Burnham, what we're going to expect from a Burnham government. James, what do you reckon?
Hi, Julia. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
This self-proclaimed king of the North business drives people who actually live in the North.
I don't think
Manchester.
I don't think he is self-proclaimed. I think other people call him that in his defence.
I think it must be the people in the South and not realising how big the North is.
Yes, they've heard of Manchester.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm most annoyed about is that Starmer and Burnham are the same people. One's but one's covered in glitter. Andy Burnham's wife, who's now in charge of Octopus Energy, was given a contract to provide Manchester buses with the electric, the electricity. So, and that's well documented. Well documented, you can see that. So basically, he's paying himself. Who'll benefit from
this is the trouble if husbands and wives have both got high-powered jobs. I mean, if it was all declared, it was all known, and it was the best deal, and other people made the decision, I think those things are going to happen. Otherwise, you're basically saying you're going to have a stay-at-home husband or wife if you're a prominent politician.
But to proclaim that you're holier than thou and you're not Starmer and all the rest of it. You're not. You're all the same. And Makerfield's got the highest illegal immigration housing that there is in Greater Manchester.
Well, wasn't it interesting? Didn't you notice when Burnham was speaking last Friday morning in the constituency after having won, and one of the things he talked about, he didn't talk about you tackle high immigration levels or illegal immigration, but he did talk about how we need to talk about, how places like this, that's where, these people are sent and you end up with the whole roads of houses of multiple occupancy. But he wasn't saying we need to deport them or they need to be in internment camps. He was saying, basically, they need to be somewhere else, not here. Well,
yeah. But it's just the whole thing. Whatever you support for, the whole system is just corrupt to the core, and thank God, Julie, I'm getting to an age now where I'm saving for retirement so I can go and leave this country with my life and start a new life.
That's sad. That is sad. Where are you thinking of going?
Well, we've got a house in Spurn and we've saved and we're going to go now. I know you briefly touched on the Brexit before, and I voted leave. Mm-hmm. But there is part of me now, and it's purely from a selfish point of view, that I'd vote to go back in.
So you could
could leave.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where you want to go to somewhere in the EU then?
Yeah, because like I said, we've got a house in Spain, and we're in the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to be off.
And you can only spend 6 months a year there, basically.
Yeah, unless we go on a non-lucrative visa or a student visa up to the age of 80, you can still do that, believe it or not.
Go as a student, why not? But again, that's their choice. Those countries can choose whether or not they want to make it easy or not. If you've got the money, you're not turning up taking someone's job. I mean, James, thank you for that. Let's go to Brian. He's in Blackpool. Brian, you want to talk about Nigel Farage, don't you? We interviewed earlier on the show.
Yes, good afternoon. You're still the same lady I took when you were a journalist in parliamentary part. I've followed you ever since.
Hope I tipped.
Yes, you did very well.
You're a cab driver, right? Yes.
Yes, I was. I was for 55 years a London cabbie. Yes, I actually took Nigel Farage and Alex Phillips in my cab.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was about 12 years ago. I believe they were then the Brexit Party.
They'd have been MEPs, yeah?
Yeah, they were screaming and shouting at them, and the abuse was unbelievable. I got out of the cab. I was 6'1.5", 17 stone. They sort of saw me, and they thought, well, they sort of backed off a bit. But going back to the 5 million he received.
Because I asked him, one of the things I asked him about was about this 5 million donation from a crypto millionaire Brit who lives in Thailand.
They were don't forget, they are personal friends.
Yep.
It was a personal donation to a person that wasn't in Parliament
I get that,
at the time. So he doesn't have to declare it.
Well, no, the rules say anything in the year before you become an MP, and you have to declare.
Yes, I know, but the lawyers turn around and say there is a slight difference if you are a private citizen and you have no intention of joining when he took it.
And I don't believe he did at the time. And I also understand the security aspect. He does need the security. You've seen that. He absolutely does. But fundamentally, I think it's turned out to be a mistake. Do you not?
No, I think he was correct by not. I think Parliament, I've been around Parliament for, as I say, for a long time. I think Queen Victoria was on the throne. I met Sir Churchill when I was 16 years of age. So I've been around quite a few prime ministers over the years. And I just wanted to say another thing.
Okay, just finally,
You showed a quick little clip about when the Brexit he announced.
David Dimbleby announcing it on the BBC at 20:05 on the 24th of June 2016,
Took him in the morning. I took him home to Wimbledon.
Did you?
And I turned around and says, we never joined the EU. We joined the EEC. He slammed the window shut on me.
He's a complete full-on Remainer, he really is. No doubt it's all about that. Oh, great call, Brian. Thank you so much. Thank you for that journey many, many years ago. We're going to take a quick break. Well, we're going to be talking about that and many more things with our main next guest. Lord Frost, David Frost, as was the former, he's the chief negotiator on Brexit for Boris Johnson when we actually left. We're going to be talking to him about Brexit 10 years on. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:35 is the time. I'd like to say, still with me in the studio is political editor of The Critic, that's Henry Hill. And we've also been joined by David Frost. Now, Lord Frost, of course, an independent peer, former Cabinet Office Minister. And before all of that, we all got to know him when he was the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's chief Brexit negotiator to actually get us out of the European Union, quite some years after we actually voted to do so. A very big welcome to you, Lord Frost.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Jonas. We just had Brian on the phone. He was a cabbie. He's driven me. He's driven David Dimbleby. He's driven Nigel Farage. He's driven everybody. Hangs around Westminster quite a lot in his cabbing days. And he's reminded us. And we've got a clip of this of when, of course, when we found out that Britain was going to No, when Britain had voted to leave the EU, because, goodness me, it was touch and go whether we actually would leave the EU. This was actually not the 23rd of June 2016, it was the early hours of the 24th of June 2016, when David Dimbleby on the BBC rather wearily announced that Britain had voted to leave. Let's have a watch and a listen.
Well, at 20 minutes to 5, we can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU. We are absolutely clear now that there is no way that the Remain side can win. It looks as though the gap's going to be something like 52 to 48, so a 4-point lead for leaving the EU. And that's the result of this referendum, which has been preceded by weeks and months of argument and dispute and all the rest of it. The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is that we're out, except an awful lot of people, including our current Prime Minister. And it would seem the next Prime Minister didn't really listen to that speaking by the British people. Just thinking back, Lord Frost, to that moment, you weren't involved in that side of government at that time.
No.
Does that still give you a little chill down there?
Yeah, it does. I think we all remember, right, where we were at that moment, and I do.
Lying in bed crying. With joy.
Something like that. It was, yeah, it was unexpected, let's face it, and so all the more beautiful when it happened. And, of course, we didn't know what was to come. And the chaos, the attempt to take over the constitution, the attempt to subvert the vote, everything that happened in those subsequent 5 years.
I mean, it is extraordinary. I knew we bang on about it, but it's the single biggest democratic vote for anything this country's ever done. And Dimbleby, I mean, okay, it was tired. He'd been on air for about, I think, 6 hours at that point, covering the results of the Brexit referendum. He was actually wrong to say, in the 70s, we didn't vote to join the EU. We joined the EU, and then there was a vote whether we stayed in or not.
That's right.
So this was their first in or out vote. So many senior figures on the left are now basically talking about rejoining. And Keir Starmer, he spent 3 years as Shadow Brexit Secretary trying to, not just to try and rejoin, to try and stop the actual Brexit vote that we had voted for to actually happen. Liberal Democrats, the Greens, many in the Conservative Party as well. We were scuppered an awful lot, and you had to work with them. The civil service, the previous negotiations, the likes of Sir Ollie Robbins for Theresa May when she was Prime Minister, basically, giving away pretty much everything. The negotiations were scuppered by them. But we've got it now. We've got Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, talking about how now is the time to rejoin. We've got Keir Starmer, still really wants to rejoin, trying to take us in by the back door. We've got Andy Burnham, who only a few months ago wanted to keep quiet about it in the Makerfield by-election because there's so many Leave voters there, but only a few months ago said he wants to rejoin in his lifetime. Why do you think so many people on that side of the debate have failed to accept the result of that debate?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Of course, there are plenty of them. Yvette Cooper, Hilary Benn, both behind the bills that took over the negotiating bloc as leaving without a deal, now Foreign Secretary and Northern Ireland Secretary. These people are all still around. I think the honest reason is that they regard what happened as some horrific aberration, some sort of diversion of destiny and natural history, that suddenly Britain got off the path and went its own way, and they just regard it as something that shouldn't have happened.
Some just strange anomaly.
Yes.
Those ghastly people who vote, and it's of course bearing in mind the history of the EU, the amount of times where France, Ireland, I think, was it Denmark as well? But basically voting, Holland, voting to sort of not agree to a particular treaty, some particular changes, more integration, more power for Brussels, and basically being told, no, go back and vote again. Yeah. And interestingly, their political leaders did that. No wonder these people expected, the Nick Cleggs, the David Camerons and others, no wonder they expected that we would do that.
Yeah, that's right. That's what the EU has always done. And I think a lot of the, at least in the initial months, a lot in the EU, in the Commission, thought we were going to do that as well and didn't quite believe it when, let's remember right at the start, we did say this isn't going to be reversed. We're not going to run this again. And then that started to look a bit less convincing.
You took over the negotiations pretty late in the the day, an awful lot of big. How much had basically already been tied up, and how much had your hands been tied by what had been agreed under Theresa May in terms of the timetable and what was discussed?
Well, mostly it had been, our hands had been tied.
You couldn't just go, Boris Johnson couldn't have gone, we're starting from scratch again.
No, so I mean the withdrawal agreement was about like 6 inches thick, massive detail on EU citizens, the exit bill, and other things. And you remember what it was like. We were just desperate to get the results delivered.
And was that because people were clamouring for it? And, of course, the election in 2019 was run by the Tories, by Boris Johnson, as a get Brexit done.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
He was elected by Tory MPs who didn't like him or trust him at all to get Brexit done. And Nigel Farage stood down his party from lots of seats so he could. But was it just we need to get something over the line? Or was it there was a fear that if he didn't get it done soon, it was going to be overturned?
We were really worried that if we didn't get it done quickly, voters were just going to lose faith in the political class generally and the Constitution.
Oh, well, they did. They have.
They did, but like permanently, they would never think their vote was worth anything again. And so it wasn't only about the EU. It was like, we've got to do this. People voted for it. It needs to happen. And we recognised we'd have to accept much of what Theresa May had done. We improved somewhat the Northern Ireland bits and some other bits. But the intention was to sort it out afterwards.
Was it a bad deal?
Well, I wouldn't have started the withdrawal agreement from where we took it over if we'd had any choice. I think the Northern Ireland bits are better than the Theresa May arrangement. They're still unsatisfactory. Yeah. But when, as I said, when Parliament passes a law saying you can't leave unless you get a deal, then in the end you have to take the deal that's there.
Do you think we'd have had a better deal if the EU hadn't decided to try and give us a punishment beating with however they could? I mean, they absolutely wanted not just to punish us, but to punish our political class as well for not overriding the will of the people, but also, crucially, to send a message to any other country, at the time, lots of countries had movements looking towards leaving the EU. Do you think, though, if our entire political class had, as they claimed they did, accepted the result, honoured the result and said, right, we've got a lot of political differences, but it is in all our interests that Britain gets the best deal. If the political classes had not been, going on little trips to Brussels, if we hadn't had, even our then Chancellor, Philip Hammond, trying to undermine the negotiations, would we have got a better deal?
Yeah, of course. If we'd had a Prime Minister who really wanted to do it, we had Theresa May who didn't. And if we'd had all those conditions you suggest, because the EU really tried to play the different parts of the British political system against each other.
They didn't try to, they played it magnificently.
And, some of the people you mentioned deliberately helped them do that.
Look, you've worked in the world of the civil service. You worked with all these people, the blob. So many of whom were trying to stop it from happening again. And there are still people to this day. I mean, when I get, called a baby killer in Gaza or a transphobic big or whatever I am this week, it's difficult to keep up, David. I just think, but this is nothing compared to the vitriol, the hatred over Brexit and the vitriol that was directed at anybody who campaigned for or supported Brexit. Very big. Bigots, ignorant, racist, xenophobic. I mean, every insult under the sun. Some of the worst things you can call people in, frankly, a Western democracy. Yeah. Why do you think so many people feel so strongly that being inside the EU and ceding so much of our national sovereignty to Brussels bureaucrats and the leaders of other countries is such a vital thing for our country and so good for our country?
I think there's a mix of reasons for it, really, and it kind of depends who you ask. I think some people just, are a bit suspicious of democracy and don't like big, important decisions being taken by people who they regard as a bit sort of uneducated and not really.
These are the people that think you should have to have a degree to vote. Those people, aren't they?
Yeah, that sort of thing. There are people who, are genuinely committed to Europe. Fair enough. It's a view. There aren't many of them in Britain.
It's a view.
But there are some. And I think, a lot of it is people who've just kind of come to believe the propaganda, the endless series of, you know, scare stories, economic disaster, this, that, and the other.
And the claims that we've lost 8% of our GDP.
Yeah, all this kind of hysterical stream of economic studies we keep getting at the moment, and some of that has kind of sunk in. And
a lot of people forget. I mean, 40% of people working in the city voted for Brexit.
Yes,
I mean that's right. It's one of those things that, you know, a lot of them couldn't admit it, but
that's right.
But they did. I mean, they were told that people who understand didn't vote for it. No, and interestingly, they were largely the entrepreneurs.
That's right. And it's interesting that the city is beginning to change its mind, I see, about wanting to go back in, because they now realise what can be done when you have control over your own rules.
Well, we've no doubt, you know, with Keir Starmer, who spent 3 years desperately trying to stop it from happening in the first place. Keir Starmer is on his way out. I think I'm utterly thrilled about this. You look pretty thrilled. I think my audience is. Andy Burnham looks like to be the next Prime Minister, but he has said very recently he wanted to rejoin. We've just had Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, saying whoever is the next Prime Minister should talk about rejoining. Still got the Lib Dems, the Greens, large swathes of the Tory party. As we know, it's still pretty pro-EU as well. We were going to have some Brexit reset talks, which Keir Starmer was supposed to have. They've now been postponed. And we understand they've been postponed by the EU because they reckon Andy Burnham is a softer touch. Are you fearful that they're not going to go for a manifesto commitment for returning to the EU and a referendum? Because in terms of a referendum, you know, having to join the euro and no rebate, the huge costs, I mean, the terms we'd be offered would be dire. I don't have a hesitation to know that we would slam dunk win a not going back into the EU referendum. However, taking us in by hook or by crook, just sort of gradually here and there, the student programme, the giving more powers away. Are you worried that it's going to be undone by politicians who consider that, you know, being back in the EU is the #1 job of any British politician?
Yeah, I am worried, and it's really important that the Leave movement kind of mobilises again against this. I do agree. I think the most likely thing for the people like Sadiq Khan and so on, Andy Burnham want is step by step. You know, join the food and drink rules as we're doing, then join a bit more of the single market, then a bit of the customs union, and then you run the argument, well, we're in so much already. Yeah. Wouldn't it be easier to actually get some say in these decisions rather than have to accept them? And that's how it will happen.
I think the thing that's going to be the kicker is people going on summer holiday this year and having to deal with the new rules for non-EU citizens and queuing up for passports and queuing at the ports to get in. But again, a lot of that. I mean, that's just bureaucratic incompetence. They've got every right to check who's coming in the country.
Course. Yeah. They absolutely have, and you know, let's hope it kind of improves.
Do you think that's part of them trying to punish us? I mean, they seem to be remarkably relaxed about their borders at the east and you know, Spain and Greece and Italy, but seem remarkably bothered about people coming over from Gatwick Airport.
Yeah, I mean, it's not designed for Brits. Clearly, you know, it makes no sense to apply it in the same way. But this is a kind of middle class Remainer preoccupation. The average number of flights taken by a British person is 2. 1 out and 1 back each year. That's the average.
We'll cope. I'd say I stand in that passport queue holding my British passport going, sod you, it was worth it every single 100%. Day. Henry Hill is listening to all of that. Your response?
No, I completely agree. I think that they're never going to pick the big fight, right, because we would win. But it is the fact that you can sign up to all the little technical details and nobody really minds, and then it's exactly what you say. It's like, well, given that we're having to be a rule taker all the time, that is insidious. But I think the pointlessness of it is, I don't think there'll ever be a point where they could win the referendum. No. So they would just bind us into all of these things and still not get what they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's really important to draw the line now. You know, what they'll say is something, well, you know, it's just a few checks on food. What is really your problem with this? Wouldn't it be easier? But you've conceded the principle, you've undermined your ability to object to the next stage, and before you know it, you're starting to go down.
Absolutely, and no other countries in the world think that to have a decent trade deal and good relations means you allow those other countries to have a say of your own laws. Right. It's quite. I always say to every American, "Oh, you're interested in having Mexico and Canada decide your laws, are you?" Utterly perplexing.
Yeah.
Still, I say, waking up to that amazing amazing news of that referendum result. The clip, what I was watching David Dimby live, genuinely one of the greatest days of my life, and all of ours, and I think many of our audience do. Thank you for your role in helping to get us whatever deal we could get. Lord Frost here, former Cabinet Office Minister, and of course our former Chief Brexit negotiator. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about the World Cup. England play Panama tonight. This is Talk.
What they're ashamed of is the English flag. Scottish flag, fine. Welsh flag, fine. Irish, everything like that's marvellous. But no. We can't be English. And this has been going on for a long, long time.
He would be Prime Minister of the most toxic political brand in the country at the moment, which is Labour. And that is what we will be battling against.
Our Prime Minister is allegedly attacked by another nation and nothing is said.
This is a reminder that Russia regards the United Kingdom as a hostile power.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Of course, it's not Panama, it's Ghana tonight. I know it's Ghana. England are playing Ghana tonight. By the way, as you know, the 2026 World Cup has kicked off. Here at Talk, we are celebrating in style. That's why we are giving you the chance to boost your bank balance with a massive £26,000 in tax-free cash for a summer you won't forget. Here's how to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion, full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Very good luck with that. Well, good luck to the England team playing tonight, of course. Max Scott, TalkSport reporter, is back with us. Gave us predictions before the last match. I've got to be honest, I'm in a league with there's 12 of us from the office in a league. I'm currently languishing 12 out of 12. Not doing bad. I've had some good results, but I mean everyone else chose their teams better. You have to choose 10 different teams. How do you rate our chances tonight?
I think England got a great chance, particularly with that second half performance last week, which has been billed as the most entertaining England performance in any World Cup second half. And the togetherness that Thomas Tuchel's been trying to create in this squad is palpable. All of the players that we speak to at TalkSport, all of the press conferences, there's clearly something about the manager that makes these, that I think is bringing out that extra yard, that extra percentage from these players. Yeah. This is a Ghana team who have some strong players. They didn't qualify for the AFCON for the first time since 2004. They've had 5 managers in the last 5 years. I'm feeling good about this. They've been in disarray, and so I'm sure you might have seen this on the back pages this morning, but a witch doctor in Ghana has said that he's going to curse Harry Kane, as he claims he did Ronaldo in the 2014 World Cup, in order to give Ghana the helping hand that I predict they'll probably need.
I mean, good luck with that. And how have they done in their first match?
So in their first game, they beat Panama 1-0, a 95th minute winner. They weren't the better team, but they
stroke a luck.
But they've got the players, they've got the pace, the technique, the power to cause issues, particularly on the counter-attack, which is exactly what they did against Panama.
How significant is it, not only just getting a good sort of stonking win with some really good players. Again, an ugly win is fine. We'll take an ugly win, but we'd rather have a beautiful one, as we saw in that second half last time round. But how does what impact does it have when Harry Kane scores 2, Jude Bellingham also scoring, and I'm trying to think who the third Marcus Rashford scoring. Does that boost them, and does that make them just stronger?
Yes.
3 scorers in that match.
It has to, because traditionally England's big players like Harry Kane haven't necessarily turned up to these big tournaments. Harry Kane's been plagued with little niggling injuries in previous major tournaments. He's come in fit and firing, like we spoke about last week. And so when your talisman, Harry Kane, when your sort of golden child, Jude Bellingham, are playing the way that they are, singing off the same hymn sheet, not only psychologically for the nation, but also for the opposition, because this is a World Cup where Messi's already scored 5 goals, Mbappe's on 4, Haaland's on 4, all of the big players are coming to the fore, and if England can match that, then I think that the perception from other nations is slowly changing because of it.
And there's a big competition for the Golden Ball, isn't there?
Yeah, I think this might be the tournament.
The biggest scorer at the tournament.
Yeah. This might be the tournament where we get the most goals from strikers, which sounds like a strange statistic, but often you find sometimes these big players don't turn up in big tournaments because their national team isn't as good as their club team, etc.
And they're used to having the whole team in their Premier League or whatever sort of play to, get the ball to them and then they score.
Yeah, and we're seeing that happen more in international football in this World Cup. So I think psychologically what Thomas Tuchel's achieved in such a small space of time is really positive.
Excellent. Well, Henry Hill is still with us. You were just saying in the break, you'll watch a big game. You're not a massive football fan, but has it? I mean, we were talking, Max and I, last week that actually the World Cup hadn't really quite excited the nation yet, and now it feels like. Yeah, we're there now. We're there.
Yeah, it does start sort of seeping through, doesn't it? I mean, the rest of my family, absolutely huge football fans. I confess, I'm occasionally a little bit more like that famous Mitchell and Webb sketch about the endlessness of the football. But the national team is different, and honestly, I just find watching it so stressful. I don't know how all of you do it. I watched England versus Italy in the Euros in Belfast, and we really got into it because the Irish fans were all in favour of Italy, and it was the most nerve-wracking 90 minutes I've ever passed. I think so. Yeah,
but it's particularly
people who do it every week is just
particularly always horrible watching England, unless you get very, very relaxed about it. And of course, we've still got everyone getting really in a tiz about these water breaks, rehydration breaks. But given the weather we're going to have